Good evening. My name is Helen Picard, Chair of the North Andover School Committee. It is 7:02 on 6/24/2021, and I'm calling this meeting back to order after executive session. And I would ask everybody to please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I would remind everybody that this meeting is being recorded and we need to silence all our devices. We are open to the public tonight. I don't know if there's any public in the room, but I welcome the public. And I just want to give an update. We no longer need to read the emergency order because that expired, but on June 16th, 2021, Governor Baker signed into law an act extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. This act includes an extension until April 1st, 2022 of the remote meeting provisions of his March 12, 2020 executive order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. And so the two main things that public should be aware of is that the new law allows public bodies to continue to provide live, adequate alternative means of public access, which we do through our local cable station. And we did that before the pandemic, and I'm sure that we'll continue to do that after the pandemic. And the second thing the law does is authorize all members of a public body to continue to participate in meetings remotely. So if folks have any questions about that, they can certainly contact the chair, or they can look at the Attorney General's website for the guidance on what we're doing with that. So that's the update on the open meeting law. I am continuing to meet remotely at this moment, but everybody else is in the room. So we will continue to have roll call votes, and I'll start with a roll call of who is in the meeting. And I'll let you know, Bill at North Andover Cam, I do not have a visual of the room right now. So who's here? Ms. Vitsky Lynch?
Here.
Ms. Petrowski?
Here.
Mr. McDevitt?
Here.
Ms. Mabley?
Here.
And Dr. Gilligan, can you introduce your team?
Yeah, Dr. Mealy, Assistant Superintendent.
Here.
Lorene Marks, Assistant Superintendent.
Here.
Executive Director of Special Education, Marcy Bacuzzi.
Here.
Director of Health and Wellness and Nursing, Cheryl Bozak. And Dr. Chan, School Physician. And we have other members that we're going to introduce later as part of our school subcapacity team. So, capacity
Wonderful.
subcommittee.
Wonderful. So that's everybody who's on the call or in the room. And so our first order of business is public comment. Is there anyone from the public in the room who wishes to make a comment at this time? If so, please step up to the microphone at the end of the table.
There is no one, Madam Chair.
Excellent. Well, I invited them anyway. So that's what it sounds like. If you're ever in the room with us, you'll be invited in that way, I would imagine. So we do have one comment from our form that we've been receiving all year. And while I pull that up, I will just say that our next chair will have to determine how we're going to be continuing to accept public comment in the future, whether it'll only be in person or if there will also be technological means by which to do that. So we have one public comment through the form, and it was stated, please share my comments during the meeting. It is from Kelly Cormier of 169 Andover Street. It says, hello, thank you for all your efforts on behalf of the children in our community. My comment is regarding the mask guidance for fall. Please continue to require everyone wear masks in school until the CDC says it is no longer required for unvaccinated people/children. Thank you, Kelly Cormier. So thank you for that, Kelly. And that concludes our public comment agenda item, and we're on to the consent agenda, which is the approval of minutes from June 10th, 2021. So I'm looking for a motion to accept the minutes as presented in the packet.
I'll move to approve the minutes of June 10th, 2021 as presented in the packet.
Second.
So moved by Mr. McDevitt, seconded by Ms. Lynch. Are there any corrections, questions, discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote, starting with Ms. Vitsky Lynch.
Yes.
Ms. Petrowski.
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt.
Yes.
Ms. Mabley.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so that's unanimously approved. the minutes from June 10th, 2021. And our next agenda item is the superintendent's report. Dr. Gilligan.
Yes, so we have two things on the superintendent's report today, and we'll start with our annual health presentation. I'm thrilled to introduce Cheryl Bozak. And before I do, I'd just like to say, yeah, you can come on up, Cheryl. I know we haven't done this in a while, but have a seat right there. Just an amazing job by you and your team this year. I mean, by all staff across all levels. You know, in every aspect of what we do in schools was different this year. But our nurses and our team with contact tracing and everything else, you kept us safe. You put the protocols in place, you train the parents, you send out the notification I still get every night to make sure we're still safe. And it's absolutely remarkable what you and your team have accomplished. And I'm just so proud to work with you. So, and all of the nurses at each and every school, as well as the town folks as well. So thank you.
So thank you. So hopefully you're not getting the message anymore. Only people that have community programs in summer school will be receiving the messages, I hope now. So thank you for the kind words. Also, I would like to just acknowledge that it was a change of roles for everyone. I mean, it wasn't just the school nurses. Of course, I'm going to say great things about all of our school nurses, but really the entire school community and the town community as well. Parents had to make changes to their role and how they, you know, called us and made sure students didn't come to school when they're sick, and all of the staff, the teachers had to pivot and make changes to their roles. So, I mean, everyone made changes. Of course, I'll call out Erica Murphy with food services and working with Rick Gallant, and Marcy, who I know is on this call as well. I think about her last summer when we were ordering PPE and opening summer school. And the thing that makes me proud and grateful is that our community, other lead nurses and other people in districts would say to me, how are you opening summer school? And how did you get food for your vaccine clinic? And I just asked somebody, because that's how we work here. And so we are lucky to be in this community. And I just want to make sure I started with that. And the support of the school committee as well. I've always felt supported, so thank you. Next slide, Jim. So we all expanded our vocabulary this year. I asked the nurses to write the new words that we started using this year, and there were so many. You know, we started with flattening the curve and isolation and quarantine, and all of you know these words too now. It's just amazing how we were able to do that, and what's the difference between a PCR test and a rapid antigen test. And it was a change for a lot of people, but I think we all really embraced it and moved forward. So that was just kind of a fun slide. So here are the numbers that we had for North Andover for the weekly positive cases. There were 347 over the course of the year. And you can see where we had, you know, the larger numbers over the winter break and the holidays, and as it tapered off. What was really important was, I've spoken many times this year to you guys, so you know we had a great collaboration with the health department, but also with parents, and parents would notify the nurses right away when they had a positive case, sometimes before the state would even put it on the system website, and we were able to get the cases early, start contact tracing, and I think that really benefited us in this situation. And I was really happy that on the last day of school, I could put on the dashboard 0, because it was 1 on the day before, and that person came off isolation. So we are at 0 right now, and today we met again with the health department. The COVID team meets every Thursday, and we met again today. And Caroline Ibbotson told me that there's 0 cases in North Andover today. Wow. 0. So she had 1 as of yesterday. So we have 0 in the schools, 0 in the community. So I think that's a good number to make some of our decisions on. Like, we really, I know there's a lot of protocols and things are up in the air, but knowing that we have 0 cases in the community is a good way to use that as a piece of data.
Cheryl, just for clarification, that slide with those bars are school cases, not general North Andover cases?
Yes, thanks for the question. These are cases in our school district with students and staff only, not the community.
Right.
The community had over 3,000 cases, and of those, 347 were in the schools. But that doesn't tell the whole number, because every one of those cases, the nurses would contact and find out who were the close contacts. And that involved talking with the teachers, the principals, of course, the parents, the families. And there was so much education with the close contacts. This was brand new, and families were nervous, and the nurses were just fabulous. They went above and beyond, speaking to families and letting them know what it meant to be on quarantine and what they had to do. And if you remember, the guidelines continuously changed. Was it 5 days to test, 7 days to test, 14 days? And so this represents probably 4,000 family phone calls throughout the school year, because they went above and beyond. I'll use the word care coordination, because they made sure they had food, because that was one of the questions that we made sure we asked. And that's where Erica Murphy, if anyone needed it, she'd make sure that they were, got food. Usually the whole family would have to quarantine, so you can't leave. And if you don't have family in the area, the nurses would pick up prescriptions. They would deliver food. One of the middle school nurses helped somebody get heat. So they really, tremendous care coordination throughout the entire year. This was just such a huge impact for the community. And they all stepped up, nights, weekends, and no one complained about it, and they just took this on as their role.
Amazing.
That's that slide. Jim, thanks. Another piece of information is we wanted to make sure we could see patterns and see if there was school spread. So this is a slide where it gives the number of cases per grade, per school, OLA, staff. Because of course our goal was never to have a school go remote. We knew the value of having students in person, and we wanted to make sure we could do that. And on the bottom line, on the totals, the 2 schools that we did have to go remote for a short amount of time was Franklin and the high school, but you can see in the numbers it was represented. And we were really cautious and paid attention and to when we had to do that. So nursing, on school nurse day, I was trying to think of what I wanted to write to the nurses, because they were just such a fabulous team this year. They really got closer, and they really supported each other tremendously. And so I thought of selfless service, and I've just been thinking about that and how they reacted to this pandemic. They were so concerned about the staff and the families. They made sure they were educated. We had DPH calls twice a week, where they made sure they knew all of the new protocols, all of the new treatments, everything, any new article, we would review it to make sure that it was scientifically based, and how we could educate people to understand why we were making changes, because they happened so much. And I think they really were the health expert in the community. I think the teachers really looked up to them, and I think they were available for everybody. Again, like I mentioned, contact tracing I talked about. The collaboration with the health department was another area that other communities just couldn't understand how we could do that. Like, how do you have access? Well, we just shared. I shared PowerSchool, they shared Maven, and we just had a private document, and we were all able to know which school had cases, so that we knew if there was a sibling in another school. So that was shared with all of the nurses and the health department. So for vaccine clinics, when the vaccine first became available, it was really hard to get. And the nurses again stepped up here and helped staff get appointments. And then of course we worked with Greater Lawrence and were able to have a staff clinic. The high school students, we also had a clinic in school. Most high school students received their vaccine outside because they were over 16. When we left school, I think there were 940 high school students already fully vaccinated. But the middle school project I thought was above and beyond. We found out on a Thursday that it would be available for ages 12 to 15. And on Monday, we had a clinic for 468 students. And again, that was because everyone in the district just said yes. George Gonzalez, does Monday work? What's another date? The custodians set up tents and all the tables, and nurses volunteered to help. We had music. Erica gave us popsicles. I mean, it was just, imagine being a 12 to 15-year-old having to get a vaccine, but you're outside with all of your friends under a tent, and you have nurses every student was interviewed by a nurse, asked how they were feeling, but we also asked, are you nervous? And so anyone that was nervous had a nurse go with them if they wanted it. Again, this was all voluntary. And she would sit with them while they got their vaccine. And Caroline told me a story with one of the students she was with, and Caroline said, "Oh, do you want me to hold your hand?" And we talked about handshaking, but and she was so nervous, like with COVID, I didn't think we're allowed to touch people, and I think about that and the future for our students, what that means, because they don't think they can touch people. And Caroline, of course, said, "No, we'll wash our hands after," and she held her hand, but it was really a fabulous day, and I think it was helpful for parents, and it was just a very supportive way to receive a vaccine for middle school students. And again, thinking about that emotional reaction that students have, we have started to be proactive with paying attention to the social emotional needs that will happen. Dr. Chan's here with us tonight, and we did already have one collaborative meeting with Andover and with his pediatric practice, with Nikki Murphy, and Ms. Picard was on the call as well. So we know we have to move forward with this as an important aspect to follow through on next year.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
One, I mean, I think the vaccine clinic was unbelievable and fantastic and just so amazing. Do you anticipate if, and it may be during the summer, if the guidelines change and it then opens up to, I think I've started to see some things about 3 to 12 being the next age group, that we would do something, I don't know where, perhaps at the middle school, a central location, maybe summer fun. Is that
So of
somewhere
course,
on the radar?
yes, in fact, at our meeting, not this Thursday, but last Thursday, Caroline asked if we could do that, of
Okay.
course.
Okay,
Because
great.
we're public health professionals, and we encourage and support the vaccine. It certainly isn't mandated, but it's a great thing
Okay.
to have vaccines.
So, I mean, I think that would be tough,
Yeah.
logistically, I mean, there's some things, I can't imagine, the summer fund not wanting to be part of that, but, maybe it's an option there, and people, who may not be participating in summer fund, have another day where they can, go by the middle school or, something like that.
Yeah,
But,
any way to vaccinate
huge-
people, we would 100%
Huge
support.
opportunity.
Yes,
Awesome.
thank you.
And just helps us get back to fall 2021. So, great. Thank you.
So typically, the health report that I present to you guys, this is a familiar slide. Usually, the health office visits are in the 40,000 range, and this year with 17,507, and again, the students were in half-time. And parents did a fabulous job keeping their students home or children home when they were sick. So I think that's why we have that lower number. The medications, again, they're all about half, which makes sense. But again, parent communications were probably more than 4,000. There were about 4,000 with the contact tracing, but the health office visits, there were another 2,000. So there were so many communications with parents.
What does PRN stand for again?
As needed.
Okay.
So someone comes in and needs Tylenol, it doesn't have a prescription for it, but comes in and they need that.
Okay, all right.
And these are the medical, emotional health conditions that I also report on yearly, and they really haven't changed. I thought I'd put them in the slide deck so that you could see that we still obviously keep track of everything. But the numbers are very similar, and I already mentioned that we will certainly pay attention to anxiety and depression as we move forward next year.
So these aren't students who came in, for example, like, it's not like we had 31 students who had a seizure in schools.
Nope.
It's just
These are the
31 students
diagnoses,
who have
right.
that diagnosis.
And
Okay.
these are parent reported, so this is what comes into Power School.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay.
Next slide. So this is the fabulous team. These are our school nurses as well as our retired school nurses, because we're a team that really enjoys working together, and I just want to thank you again for this year. It was certainly extraordinary. It was a great learning year. I think we did a great job as a community, and I want to thank all of the staff for helping. Like, everyone stepped up.
Thank you, Cheryl. Is there anybody on the committee who has a comment or a question for Cheryl?
I just have a comment. I think it's a credit to you that all of your staff is willing to go above and beyond during everything with, delivering meals to families that quarantined or arranging for heat. I mean, I'm not surprised. So I just want to give you credit where it's due too.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions?
I would echo that. I mean, I think every year, your team is amazing, and the compassion and the care that they give to our students. When, something happens at school and mom and dad aren't there, it's, you fill that role, and, you guys are fantastic. Do you imagine next year kind of having to continue things like contact tracing? And I know I'm asking you to have a crystal ball out there, but, with variants that are there, I mean, I think we're looking at some things in terms of no mask, but, is that something that is being discussed? Is it still a little early?
So we're talking about that now because we have summer programs, and so we will continue with contact tracing for students that were less than 3 feet. So we're going to continue with the guidelines that we currently have through the summer, but everything's lifted for the fall. As far as I don't know what the guideline for contact tracing will be in the fall. We did ask Caroline, so as of today, it's the less than 3 feet, you would continue with contact tracing. And I would imagine that would be the same, but luckily our cases are so low, and as more people are vaccinated, and the vaccine is currently working against this variant. Yep. I believe Brian today said North Andover as a community is more than 74% fully vaccinated, so that's great. And the numbers come out today. I haven't looked at them yet, so it might be even higher after a week.
Okay. And then my last question is somewhat, and I think I ask this every year, not necessarily COVID related, but what do you need? And you don't necessarily have to answer that today. Is there equipment that you need in order to service kids? And I know, like, if there's, a known case with, a student, it's not there anymore, but, a seizure, a student with a seizure diagnosis, is there equipment that is needed? And I know if it's medically there, like, you have it to support our kids. But are there other things that you just...
So there's one thing that I forgot to mention is that we are part of the, I have to remember the name, CSHS, the school health grant, the DPH school health grant, and so we do have $80,000 in that grant that I'm able to use to help supplement. And of course, anytime I've ever gone to Dr. Mealy, we don't ask for things that we don't need, and I shouldn't tell people, but Jim's never said no to me. So, so I feel extremely supported in this district. But thanks for that question.
Ms. Petrowski, anything?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for all your work as you're going through all of this and talking about everything that happened. I almost got a little teary just kind of reliving it with you, as we all kind of had our own experiences, and I know my family we had our own situation, and just thank you for all the work that you've done. It was, I'm sure, just beyond anything anybody could have ever imagined, but we're so fortunate to be part of this community and to be on the receiving end of all the work that you've done, so thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Pam. Ms. Mably, anything to add?
Very similar, just that I did have friends tell me that, you said there was such an important relationship that the parents did call. I know friends who called probably on a hangnail type of thing because they wanted to be so sure they were doing things right. And the fact that they felt comfortable calling and asking, should we be sending our kid or not? And then when you're saying, yes, that's okay, or no, that they felt super comfortable with what you were suggesting and your team was suggesting. That's why that partnership worked, was because they could trust what you had to say.
Yeah, and the one other thing I forgot we did was we set up that call from 6 to 10 a.m., 6 to 8 a.m.
That's right.
So before school, and that was one of our retired nurses.
Yep.
And I used the grant in COVID, and we paid her to be on call, and she got a call every day.
Well, I have friends who called for that.
Even
because
last
they were
week,
so worried.
every day she
That's
had a
right.
call. Yeah.
Wow.
So,
So and other communities didn't do that.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
But
It was a good
some-
idea.
but some kids actually didn't miss school because they would call, and
Yep.
the parents were super worried, and the advice was, it sounds like it's okay to come.
Mhm.
And that was great.
I actually have a funny story in the reverse. My son did not want to go to school one day, so he went to the nurse's office. Immediately upon my dropping him off, he went right to the nurse's office and complained of 2 of the symptoms. So they sent him home and said, go get a negative test. If it's negative, come back. And so we sent him right back to school. He was not counting on that.
Thought he bought himself 14 days.
That's right.
Yeah, those stop the spread sites were so helpful. And to have
Yes.
it right there in Lawrence and you just drove
So
right up.
excellent,
Right.
Yeah. Yep, except for when it had 5-hour-long lines. That was a little tricky.
There's no lines now.
Well, that's one of the questions I was going to ask Cheryl. As people are vaccinated, it feels like perhaps fewer people are getting tested if there are symptoms. What is the current guidance on that?
I'm sorry, if people have symptoms?
If people have symptoms, should they still be testing, whether or not they're vaccinated?
So if they have symptoms, yes, they should be tested,
Even if they're vaccinated?
even if they're vaccinated. There is a
Okay.
slight chance, but that's what the recommendation is.
Okay,
Well,
I just think we need to keep saying that because what's helped us is that when we've had testing and we've had contact tracing, we've been able to slow the spread and stop the spread. So I think it's important to say that still, like people are feeling like, oh, we're out of the woods, we're not wearing masks, we don't have to worry anymore, oh, I just have a cold now. But some of those same symptoms could be COVID symptoms, so people still need to be cognizant of testing.
I think that's a good point too, that we'll remind parents next year, please don't send your child to school sick. And also continue with the hand washing. And I know we've put it into the day in a lot of the elementary schools, and I would hope that we could continue to keep that, because I think that would help. As you know, we had no cases of the flu, 0 cases of the flu. We had no strep throat. We had very few GI stomach viruses. That had to do with a lot of the mitigation strategies. So I hope we continue with them so that we can also have a year of less of those incidents.
Yeah, that's a very good point, thank you.
I was thinking
And,
James Bowler.
One thing I'll be interested in, I think school nurses, particularly our school nurses, have become visible in a way that they may have been less visible in the past. And I'll be interested to see what this group of students that comes up in the next 12 years, how many of them will look into going into nursing or public health or health policy fields, because I think that the work you've done has brought this so clearly to the attention of students who will be looking at career paths and learning opportunities. So that'll be fun to see. Okay, thank you so much, Cheryl.
Thank
You
you.
are, unless your boss tells you have to stay, you're oh no, you can't go because we still have the wellness policy later, so stick around. This is,
Cheryl,
you're
thank
here
you.
all night with us.
I'm going to turn it over to Jim, but before I do, what was really masterful, you jogged my memory tonight, is navigating seasonal allergies. As someone who suffers from seasonal allergies, when it hit this spring, figuring that difference out, and that's where the nurses were super helpful in keeping kids in school. So tremendous, and thank you for an awesome report. Dr. Mealy, next.
So the next item has to do with fundraising and the rules and guidelines that we need to put in place. It's been kind of a pet project of Mr. McDevitt for a while now. We're finally seeing the fruit of that. It has a report that shows the fundraisers that were approved for this past year by the different clubs, teams, activities. And it also has what we plan to do going forward with regards to coaches and advisors of those teams and groups. So you can see from the packet the different fundraisers from past years, from this past year. And then getting into the guidelines and rules that all coaches and advisors each year will have to acknowledge by signing. So they'll have to read them and sign them, and then they'll be held accountable for them. So it reminds them of the policy for fundraising and the purpose, which is promote an inclusive environment supportive of all members. And then it gets into the rules about fundraising, such as no fundraising of any kind may be held in the schools without specific consent of the principal. The form has to be used, and they have to, and I think it becomes clear when you look at A through K here of what's been happening and what we're trying to avoid. So all fundraising activities must be project-based and educationally and age-appropriate. Fundraising activities may not intrude on the instructional day. It must be consistent with the North Andover Public Schools mission. The goal is to represent male and female sports teams in an equitable manner so that fundraising events will not compete with one another. Requests for fundraising must be made on the district's fundraising request form and submitted to the principal for approval. Requests must include the approximate amount to be raised and the plans for the use of the funds before approval will be granted. Requests that involve gambling or alcoholic beverage sales will not be considered for approval. All funds collected will be maintained in the student activity accounts. That one's been a bugaboo because there will be fundraisers and we don't have any say because they're not really school fundraisers. They're represented as such, but then the money is used as whoever has that account sees fit. All expenditures from the student activity accounts must be approved by the principal. Fundraising funds cannot be used to pay or reward coaches, advisors, volunteers without school committee approval. It's another one you guys are aware of. There are coaches who are not in our contract, but the team has them and they want to pay them for their services, and they do it through fundraising or other means, and so we're trying to get a handle on that as well. Any fundraising activity on behalf of a North Andover school team or group run by an outside group must identify as an outside group. It must be made clear that this effort is not sponsored by the North Andover School Department, and members of the team or activity cannot be required or coerced to participate in the fundraising activity. In addition, any funds raised by outside groups must follow the North Andover School Department policy for donations. So if they want to raise it, if they're going to have a fundraiser, they have to identify that they're not school related. Our players, our participants in the activities cannot be required to participate in that. And then if they are going to pay for something, it's going to have to come through our donation policy, through the school committee. And then coaches, advisors must comply with policy GBEBD, online fundraising and solicitations regarding crowdfunding, which is attached as well. They have to sign that, indicate what team they are the coach or advisor for, and then we also would attach the request form for them to see and the online fundraising specific to crowdfunding.
To whom does that signed form go to, that they've read and understand the requirements? Does that come to you? The principal?
No, we'll talk to the principal. It would either be the principal or the athletic director, depending on if they want to separate the coaches and advisors, but I think the principal.
Okay, and it's primarily the high school, it's primarily not the middle school or the elementaries, correct?
There's some, not teams, obviously, other than the high school, but there are other activities that we have that they do have some fundraisers for, like drama at the middle school. So it does apply to all schools.
Thank you. So let's go around and see if people have questions or comments. And there's no action required, correct, Jim?
No action required, but certainly we'll take comments and suggestions to improve this.
Okay, so Ms. Vitsky-Lynch, anything?
No comments.
Okay, Ms. Petrowski?
Not right now.
Okay, Mr. McDevitt?
Just one on the form where it has everything kind of documented, like date requested, approved, et cetera. Could we add the column in for what the money is used for? I think it's asked for on the fundraising request form. So why are they fundraising?
Got it.
Because that was, as we looked at why they were doing that, there were some very large dollars and not necessarily sure where they were spending.
Got it.
Very good. Thank you. And Ms. Mabley?
Yes, I think I asked this last time, but just to clarify again. So this is rolling out this year, now that we're actually going to be in school, and actually, I know there were some fundraising things done this past year, but who's going to then teach all these people about this?
So that would be the responsibility of the principal and the athletic director to ensure that all coaches and advisors have received this and acknowledge it, and if they have any questions, they can ask those questions.
Great, okay, thanks.
Yep.
And this is new this year, right, Jim?
Correct.
And so did it roll out at the beginning of this year, or is it just getting
No,
rolled
this
out now?
is going to
or-
be rolled out for the next school year.
Okay, Perfect. Good. So we'll look forward to what the report says next year based on these improvements. So thank you, Mr. McDevitt, for the work that you did on that, and to Dr. Mealy and his team for following up on that. So anything else? Dr. Mealy, Dr. Gilligan.
No, I'd like to thank Cheryl for a great report, and I'd like to thank Andrew and Dr. Mealy for tackling this. Appreciate it. Moving on to your report, Madam Chair.
All righty. So I have two things on my report, but before I do those, I'm going to make a couple of announcements. A few weeks ago, Ryan Roycroft, a candidate for Eagle Scout, had gotten approval from this board to do his Eagle project, an accessible raised bed at Sargent School, and he did complete that project on Wednesday of this week, last night. And I did get pictures, and I did share them with the committee. And I'm hoping at some point that those will be shared on the Seeds of Positivity page. Certainly a garden is a great thing to be able to share on that page. So we're very thankful to Ryan and to Nurse Julie Ambrose, who asked him to consider that project and really supported him through that. So we're really thankful for that. And it's going to get used this summer because we will have students in summer school at the Sargent School to be able to use the raised accessible garden beds. I also want to report out to the community that in our executive session, this committee unanimously approved the CAF workers contract and the North Andover Professional Support Association MOA from the pandemic year that we just had. So both of those were approved by school committee, and I will be signing off on them probably later tonight. So we're on to our regular listed business. Letter A is the superintendent's evaluation. So this committee, we all had a form that we were able to fill out with some bubble dots of meets or exceeds or needs improvement. So all the committee members had an extended period of time to do that. We thought we were going to do it in a very short period because our meeting was scheduled for last week, but then it got extended to this week. So all members did complete that. There were opportunities also for folks to put in their comments. And that is linked to our agenda. And I assume that committee members had an opportunity to read this, and I don't want us to spend a lot of time reiterating the things that we wrote, but I do want us to have an opportunity if we want to ask for clarification or questions about anything that's in the report. So I'd like to do that with the committee, and then I want to go to Dr. Gilligan and see if he has any questions or clarifications. And then finally, I hope that we will accept the report by a vote, much like we would approve minutes, because this report does need to go to the state. And I think we all just need to acknowledge that, yes, this represents our thinking and the words that we shared as the evaluation. So I would just start with a go around and see if folks have any questions or comments or clarifications that they'd like of anything that's in the report. And I'll start with Ms. Vitsky Lynch.
Yeah, so I was one of the ones who did it in the short time frame, and being under the gun, I did not put comments. And then I didn't go back when it was extended and, insert any. I've just been really, really, really busy at night. But my lack of comments is not any kind of reflection. My scores definitely, were all met, exceeded. So I just want to say it was an incredibly challenging year, and you did it extremely well and with a lot of class and professionalism. And one of the things I kept saying in our executive session was, I don't want to be a follower of the other towns, I want to be a leader. And you did. You rose to the occasion and you did things that other towns weren't doing. And I had school committee members in Andover calling me and saying, how did you get that done? Like, you're killing us. Now people are demanding that we start open school. So I'm just really proud of the work that everybody has done, and I thank you for all of your tremendous effort this year.
Thank you, Holly. And Ms. Petrowski. This is your first time through this process.
This is my first time through, and I, just started here in April 1st, I think, was the first day, right? So it's a little tricky and weird, but I, as a parent and a community member, I really would have, I don't even know what the word is, like, an incredible year and great job. And I'm really excited to be part of this team and to work with all of you and to work with you for the next few years. So great job. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. McDevitt?
Just a couple of quick things. Dr. Gilligan, you and I spoke earlier today on it. I think for anybody who's kind of watching this, it's a public evaluation of how you do. And I don't think any of us in our professional careers have our evaluations live streamed to everyone in the company and the community out there. So you are in a unique position for this, good, bad. There are rants that go on, online of, what's going on and how everyone can do it better. But they're not there in the seat, and they're not there making the decision that is there for all of our students. And it's very easy to be to have keyboard courage in all of that. But you are the man in the seat making the decision with the best interests from a health and an education perspective this year in particular for our district. And I think this is a year unlike any other. I hope we never have another year like this. So, there's a lot of things that are in here. It's interesting as I wrote it, and then read what other people had written, there were things that they put in there that they reflected on that I thought, oh, well, that's certainly valid, but it wasn't something that I had a perspective on. So I think you've got some really interesting things that are here. The part of the conversation that you and I had is, this is your third year, right? And so, the expectations as we move forward, right, continue to kind of be there of leading and driving and being the facilitator for change. I think you have the support of the committee. I think you have the support of people in the community to do that. It's been a tough year. It's been a tough year for a lot of people, and you've held your head pretty high with that. So, I really just want to thank you for that. And, this isn't, a final document. This is a working thing that we have. So there's things in here that we'll continue to move on, and it's not like there's anything bad that's in here, but it's how we just move forward as a community and how we build on the successes of this past year. So
Thank you, Mr. McDevitt. Ms. Mably, any questions, clarifications, comments?
Couple things. One is, I don't want to repeat things I've already written here, but as you know, Dr. Gilligan is a people person. And I remember when he went from being a principal to being at central office, he's like, I can't stand being in an office. I need to be with the kids. And that's how I make relationships, and that's how I build my team, and which is, I think, what we see from the team that you have, the leadership team and otherwise. So now, this was a whole other level of not being with the kids, right? You're not only not in the school, you can't, it was a very, very difficult year. So it wasn't your favorite way to have to operate, and I know that. And you did a tremendous job having to find other ways to get to people and communicate with them. And I thank you for that. I also want to recognize, and I know that I lost a ton of sleep in the last 15 months worrying about things. I'm sure we all have. We have as parents. And I can't imagine how much more sleep that you and Jim and Lorene and Cheryl and everyone lost, and teachers trying to do their very best. And so I thank you for all that suffering and appreciate everything that you've done this year. I also recognize that you and your colleagues are all very reflective educators and workers, and I think I certainly approached this type of evaluation trying to give you things to reflect on and encourage you to do the processes that you always do for yourself and look at ways you're going to grow on things in the future, and I'm glad that you will do that. And finally, this is my 5th year doing this. And I remember it came up right when I first started that the 5 of us at the time said that the second half these standard indicators, the radio buttons that we fill out, a lot of the stuff, that comes from the state, I think, that's element, right? A lot of those things we can't really see into. And so I think that part's hard to do, and I think that's why there are not as many comments there. But, you know, I take it on the fact that I'm trusting that you're doing your very best and your colleagues are as well. And if you weren't, we would hear about it a lot more. So I find that part of the evaluation bizarre, and I think it's just here to stay, but I just wanted to comment on that. It's a hard part to do, at least for me.
Yeah, and I would add for the committee to know, the very last comment on the report is the overall evaluation is of proficient. That we have not had that on our reports for the last few years. We haven't had the final, like, what it all means. So that was an executive summary in just a couple of words, because everything was, for the most part, positive. I think there was some excellent growth feedback. So I'm really proud of my colleagues and myself for offering some of that. And I know, Dr. Gillian, you'll take that and work with it to try to improve your practice and try to continue to grow in what you're doing. I did see that there were a number of questions that had needs improvement, and I think we are in a district of continuous improvement, but it would be helpful for me as a member of the committee, you know, to know if folks had specific ways in which they were expecting improvement to be made. So if there's anybody who wants to say some specific improvement that they would like to see, either now, or I would encourage you to talk to Dr. Gilligan, over the summer about the types of improvements that you'd like to see. I think it's perfectly fine to say some area needs improvement, but I think it's very helpful for someone to know what that improvement is that you're specifically looking for when you ask for a needs improvement. So Dr. Gilligan, do you have any questions or clarifications that you would like to ask from committee members?
Well, first and foremost, thank you last time for letting me present. It was quite a list. I am humbled and honored to be the superintendent of schools here. And I think one of the things that I look for in growing a team, and it's a team effort. This isn't just about Greg Gilligan, the superintendent. This is about an amazing team here in central office, a leadership team across the district. It's about working with teachers. It's the community, the school committee. It's everyone working together and making sure we're rowing all in the same direction. And so one of the things, though, when I hire, the most important thing, and it's a pretty rigorous process, and it's great to get back in person this year for a lot of our hiring as we're moving forward, is the ability to be, coachable and be reflective, and how do we improve our practice, and how do we build capacity for the team. So, this feedback, the ability for me to look at it and say, where can I improve? How can things get better? In different areas, I'm always looking to do so, and I'm always looking to balance out the team. I have certain strengths that are different from Dr. Mealy's or, Marcy Bacuzzi's or Lorene Marks or Cheryl's, and, we try to put the best folks on the team that are hardworking, care about kids, and put them in the right seats on the bus. And we'll continue to be relentless and always doing what's best for kids around, equity for all students, a consistent and rigorous curriculum, and targeted professional practice. And we'll continue to work tirelessly to move forward. It's been a really challenging year, and I am just, after my first year, we had the gas explosions. People say, well, one of you guys jinxed it. You said, no one could have imagined COVID. They said, what's next, locusts or floods? And we've already had the flood, so I don't want those back. But it's been a challenging year, and I'm appreciative of the support of the committee, of the people in the community, of the people on my team. And when I say my team, I mean all the folks I work with, from NADA to this team, to the principals, to the teachers, to the kids. Couldn't ask for a better place to work. And I look forward to really having a chance to sit down and look at this and move North Andover, continue to move forward, because we've done more this year than when you actually sit back and look at what we've done. I can't believe that we've done it. It seems like it's 10 years in one. But when you look back at the evidence, and I was thinking, like, wow, in a year like this, we did this, and that's a testament to the people that work here in North Andover and that continue to want to work here in North Andover. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Gilligan. So I would look for a motion to accept the report as presented in the packet.
So moved?
Second?
So moved by Mr. McDevitt and seconded by Ms. Mably. Is there any further discussion? So we'll do a roll call vote, starting with Ms. Vitsky Lynch.
Yes.
Ms. Petrowski.
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt.
Yes.
Ms. Mably.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so that is 5-0, unanimously accepting the report as presented in the packet. And I think that we depend on Ms. Zagari to forward it to the state on our behalf.
She'll report it, absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Gilligan. We really appreciate that. So now's the moment I've been waiting for.
But before you go, Ms. Farrar, can I just ask a quick question
Sure.
for Dr.
Of
Gilligan?
course.
So this is required as part of the superintendent program within the state. Is it part of the new superintendent program where it is scripted out for the first 3 years, which we've never really had anyone go more than 3? And so year 4, is this still the format that we will use, or does it then change?
No, so we've, the new superintendent program has continued to adjust.
Yep.
And I get very good at the program because I had a lot of practice of 3 years, 3 years, and 3 years working
Right.
for the different superintendents. So I think one of the things that's been nice about the committee is the goals have adjusted, not to be like the first-year superintendent goals or second-year superintendent goals or third-year superintendent goals. These goals and the work we've been doing are really a lot different than other superintendents in their third year. So I'm really proud of that. But in terms of reporting to the state, those are the standards that the state, we're all held accountable to. So that's a little bit different, but no, these are not the typical goals of a third year, probably superintendent in the new superintendent induction program. You guys have seen what those goals look like, and I think whoever the chair was in the first year, we said, a couple of them fit, but we're already kind of beyond some of this. So I'm just excited. I said to someone the other day, I think since Harry Haratunian was here, if anyone remembers Harry, I'm the first person to go beyond 3 years. And this is what I'm excited about, because this is where the rubber hits the road. This is where the real, I shouldn't say the real work begins, because we've been doing the real work, but this is where it's like we can see this through. We're making this progress. It's not this start of coming in and saying, here's what the issues are, here's how I'm going to fix it, have a plan, gather input, and then superintendents tend to move on. And I include myself in that, as part of doing an entry report. I'm excited to really see sustained change and continue to move forward. So I think these goals are different, to answer the question.
Okay. All right. And it is a good point. I mean, because the last year of every other superintendent, we have been searching for a new superintendent.
That's right.
So.
Yeah, and the previous superintendent had announced pretty early, so.
Right.
She announced, I think, in September, so, I think.
And Hutchat in like June.
Yeah, so the other day someone said, can you name them? And I said, yeah, it was Harry, Dick Bergeron, Danny O'Connor, Jimmy Marini, Chris Hoddle, Kevin Hutchinson, Jen Price, and then Greg Gilligan. So that's, I think, since 2005. So I think, the staying power, the ability to, like I said, we all have to be rowing in the same direction. Probably wouldn't fit in a crew boat, but I like that analogy of crew. I love watching it. I like crew. We gotta all have our oars rowing in the same direction, and maybe I'm in the motorboat with the bullhorn probably.
Okay.
But that's a lot of change, and it's a lot of start and stop. And it's kind of like the NFL, like you see coaches come and go, and they, I think that we've made a lot of progress, and I've learned a lot from each superintendent's brought different strengths. And we've made progress in North Andover, and I want to keep building on it and sustain it.
And just to remind the community, we did extend Dr. Gilligan's contract, so he has 2 years left with us on the current contract. So it extended from the initial 3-year contract to a total of 5-year contract. And one of the years was an overlap year, right? So this was the last year of the last contract and the first year of the new contract. I think it's helpful for people to know where that is. So we are on school committee reorganization, and by our policy, our longest standing member chairs this part of the meeting. So I am passing my virtual gavel
There's a TikTok about that. I don't know. All right.
to Mr. McDevitt.
Okay. So I will now open nominations for chair for the school committee.
I would like to do a slate. Is that okay?
uh,
I will move that we nominate Andrew as chair, Amy as vice chair, and Pam as clerk.
I will second that.
So we have a motion and a second for a slate. So I think the process would be that I would accept the nomination. So then I would ask Mrs. Mably, would you accept the nomination for vice chair?
I would accept the nomination for vice chair.
And Ms. Petrowski, will you accept the nomination as clerk?
I will accept the nomination as clerk.
Okay, all right. So is there any other nomination or slate proposed? All right, seeing none, we will now do a roll call vote, correct?
I would.
So I will start with Mrs. Picard,
Yes.
Mrs. Beechke Lynch.
Yes.
Mrs. Mably,
Yes.
Mrs. Petrowski,
Yes.
and I will also vote yes. So we have our new school committee chair, vice chair, and clerk.
I confess that I nearly threw out a nomination for you, Helen, just for fun.
Thank you. I love to be thought of.
Perfect. Okay.
Because you haven't done much this year, so.
I know. Right.
Neither have you, Ms. Mably.
She did it for the money. All right. All right. So we will now jump into old business. Correct.
Could I make a recommendation that we take things out of order since we have guests at the meeting?
We can. So I was thinking of doing the physician and wellness and then the subcommittee, but I'm happy to entertain, I guess the mask would also be there as well. Are you asking that we do subcommittee?
I am.
Okay, okay, perfect. So any objections? All right. Dr. Mealy, are you presenting?
I will be, yes.
Are you going to introduce the
I am, yep.
subcommittee?
I'm
All right.
actually gonna ask them to come on up.
Yay.
All right.
So this is the first time since the subcommittee
year.
formed that we will be in person,
Yep.
meeting in person.
It
but-
feels so weird to be this close. I'm just going to say.
I can slide over.
No, it's
So here from the subcommittee tonight is Lori Aria, Christy Martin, and Chrissy Harricle, along with the chair of the subcommittee, Holly Vitsky Lynch, and myself, Bill Hart, Stan Lempert, and Michael Liss could not make it this evening. So I have to say before I start that we were fortunate when we asked for volunteers for this committee. One, we're fortunate that no one realized how much work was going to be involved. And two, they weren't beating down the door to join the subcommittee, and so we had to beat the bushes a little bit. So we were lucky that not only were we able to get the 8, but we got 8 really good people with diverse skills and strengths that really helped shape an excellent team that I think did a really good job. And I also have to say that, you know, we've heard people ask if we know what we're doing, and we didn't get offended by the question because we asked ourselves that a few times, and to the point that we brought in the Mount Vernon group, who are the consultants that did our school building assessments. Well, they did all of the building assessments for town and schools here, and they've been involved in school projects for decades, and this specific type of project. And we asked them to review our process and the final report, and not to pat ourselves on the back, but they gave us a glowing review. Really impressed by the public input part of it, in seeking public input. But they said, yeah, that, you know, we covered all the bases and structured it as they would like to see, and they'll be involved now going forward in helping build support for the projects. But it was good to hear from them that was the case. So with that being said, what we're going to do tonight is review with you the final report. and answer any questions that you might have. This is now live. I apologize to anyone at home that wanted this linked to the agenda before the meeting. I have now done it, so you can follow along at home. But yeah, today was kind of a crazy day. I got the MSBA applications in. I drove them in to town only to find out that the office is virtual.
To Boston.
To Boston, but they had a box outside the door, and I put it in, and I called them and let them know it was there, so they have it. So that's good. All right, so we have the final report. The outline is a project summary, which includes the school needs, the school assessments that MVG, Mount Vernon Group, did, the subcommittee role and process, space analysis, which is what Lori and Stan were working on, enrollment projections, which is what Mike was working on, the research topics, which is what Christy and Chrissy have been working on, the initial options are presented in the final report by Holly, and then community feedback is in there, and then the final recommendation. So I'm not going to go over everything. One of the things that we're working on too is this final draft of the final report. It's not going to change substantively, but we'll be tweaking it based on feedback that we get as people read it and say, what about this? Or, you know, we can clarify things, but we don't believe it's going to change substantively. And
I
then
hope
the
at
other
some
part-
point you'll include the names of the people on the committee in this report, because I think you really all need credit for this excellent work.
Okay, so there's the first feedback on the final report.
Version 1.0.
Yeah. And the other
taking
part,
notes.
the other part is there is an executive summary which will front this, and part of the process right now is we have a lot more in the executive summary than we need because the report has most of that information. So we just want the executive summary to be the introduction, and if people want more detail, they can look in the final report. So we're tweaking that as well. So we start out by identifying the school needs, and it's really important for people to understand that this is not just about numbers in future enrollment, especially because everyone gets hung up on the developments that are occurring in town. But we need it now. We do not have the space for the class sizes that we want in our district, for the support services that we need to provide our students, for equity to exist among our schools, meaning that every school has a gym, a library, a music room, an art room, a cafeteria, all to a size that it should be for the size of that school. So we talk about all that with the facility updates. The assessments that are included in here, you'll see, are very detailed that were done by MVG. So our school, our three schools, elementary schools and the middle school, which had a renovation, but the three elementary schools in particular are our oldest schools. Some date back to 1950. And so it's not surprising that they need updating, whether it's in their systems, in their structure, in being able to provide the spaces that are necessary in a 21st century educational building rather than 1950. So we talk about the facility updates that are needed, the 21st century learning spaces, and this just jumped way ahead. 21st century spaces that we need. And equity among the elementary schools, which I've already mentioned. So the kind of bar that we used is Sargent and Thompson. Sargent and Thompson are our newest elementary schools, and they were designed, you know, right around 2000, and have this kind of space that you'd be looking for in an elementary school. And then the future growth is one aspect of this. If you look at, and you guys see every year, our actual numbers in student enrollments. And if you look back to, we have the data going back, I could maybe get it back further, but I don't think we need to. But it goes right back to 93 and 94 right now, and then every year since then. And it shows steady growth of 30 to 35 students per year. We're down this year in the last couple of years, in particular this year, we think, we'll find out for sure, but because of COVID, our preschool and our kindergarten are both much lower than they've been in the past. So we'll see what happens this coming year. if that bounces back. But we also had, and this is in the report, we also had enrollment projections done by an expert who is projecting that same kind of trajectory, that trend.
Is there any consideration for, if we have new schools, that young families kind of move in?
You know what, we had not thought of that, about the impact that improving the schools could have. You were at town meeting, North Andover is a very attractive place for young families already, although they are struggling to
Right.
afford to live here. So I'm not sure how much more it would be, because
I'd be
we already
curious.
have a very good reputation, and we hear that a lot, but it could be a factor.
If we're putting in or remodeling 3+ schools,
Mhm.
right, then that shows the investment in, and that may be if I'm looking at a home between perhaps here and South Andover, I might choose.
It could be a driver, yes. Yep.
It's something we saw when we built the high school. We saw,
Okay.
I think that first year of the high school, after the first year, we were up to, I think we hit like 1386 or something like
Yeah.
that. We
Okay.
saw folks-
All right.
Which was an increase over what?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. I just remember it was a bit, and it's been pretty steady at the high school since
Yeah.
then.
Okay.
But the new school was attractive to a lot of folks, especially with the school with no walls. But to Jim's point, we have some really old buildings.
It was an interesting dynamic, if you recall, the financial, recession that we had in 08, 09. We used to have about 60 to 65 students decide to go somewhere else besides our high school. And so the economy didn't encourage people to pay for private school. So then it dropped down to about 20, 25. And when the economy got better, we wondered if it would bounce back to that 60, 65. And it's got to about 30. So the theory is that people came and found they liked it, and that word got around because it did not bounce back to the previous numbers. So the next section has to do with the school assessments, which MVG did, and I'll just give you an example. What we've done is we've provided a summary, so you can see the middle school, the original part, it was built as a high school, as Dr. Gilliam will tell anybody on the bus tour that he used to give, that it was built in 1953 and has been extended in 62 and 95. But parts of it is still very old. Even the parts that were added and renovated are dated now. Middle schools and high schools tend to take more of a beating than our elementary schools do. But just, that's the summary that we have in the report, but we also have the ability for you to click on the actual reports, and you can see they're all right here. Atkinson Elementary, Franklin, Kittredge, and the North Andover Middle School. If I click on Kittredge, what you get is the location, the topography, the building, circulation and parking, utilities, play areas. It has a lot of pictures of the landscape, handicap accessibility, general building description. And I got to tell you, this came in handy when I was completing the MSBA applications. Yep. Gives you the layout, the building envelope and the existing conditions, exterior walls. It breaks it down all the different categories. I won't show you everything, you can see for yourself, but it's all in there. It's very detailed and extremely helpful. And I'm interested in seeing, because I included the assessments and I included our final report and I included the original study that MVG did that generated, the concepts that we developed into 6 options from there 1, but I included all of that in the MSBA applications, and I'm curious to see what kind of impact that has on their decision to have that kind of information. One of the things that I've heard regarding MSBA is that they want to make sure that the community is committed to these projects, and so I thought that would certainly indicate that we are. We'll find out. So that's done for each school. And just in here is the subcommittee role and process. That's where I'll add the membership, as Helen has suggested. And space analysis. So the idea with regards to space analysis is what's the current space capacity in our schools and what is the plan? Meaning, what do we have now? As an example, Kittredge does not have sufficient space for art and music and library. They're always moving it around every year. Oh, this class might be open, let's use that, or it's gonna have to be on a cart this year. They just don't have the space. The cafeteria could be bigger if you're expanding the school as well. So you look at what they have and what they should have and what the size of those areas should be based on MSBA standards. So a classroom should be around 900 square feet. Most of our classrooms are, but some of them aren't, and so that might be something that is pointed out as well. But you also have to have support services like space for EL teachers, psychologists, social workers, all the supports that we have, reading teachers. And we just don't have the space for that. We're turning, I know those at Kittredge know that we turn closets into useful space, and people look at it and say, we put somebody in here? Yeah, and so that, you try to convey is why we're looking to do all this. Lori, did you want to add anything on the space analysis? No. All right, didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I didn't want to go by without asking. So you can see.
Actually, I will add one thing.
There we go. Nice.
So my children, or two of them, go to Sargent, and I was actually very surprised as we went through this and I looked at the spaces and all the different schools, how much more Sargent had than some of the other schools, because the only other school in town that I've been in is Thompson. And the other schools I've only been outside or into the playgrounds. And I really think that it's important that all the kids have equal resources. And like you said, the reading specialists, the OTs, the PTs, all of those things matter to kids. And, we all pay the same taxes in this town. We all deserve the same schools. So that's all I have to say.
That's a good one, yeah. It's a great perspective because you may have noticed in the question regarding equity and how people felt about equity, that Sargent and Thompson, they felt like, oh, everything's great. But the three other schools didn't, and I think it would have been even more of a disparity if they had visited other schools, those
Yes.
Sargent and Thompson, and seen what's there, as Lori did.
I was just gonna add that, I think as we get closer and we start looking for things like funding, right, to do some open houses at a school and say, come by on a Saturday, and you can drive by and Kittredge looks beautiful on the outside, and you walk in and you realize that there's a classroom on the stage and it's boarded off, and you've got kids that have to go through the library to get to that back room, for something, and I think people don't realize the logistics that the administration has put into these buildings to make space.
Yeah, one of the suggestions that MVG made was a road show when we're trying to build support, in that you have them in those spaces so people can see and have them take the tour. Yep.
I might also echo on that and say that maybe include some of the teachers who are your support service teachers and get their kind of testimonials about how difficult it can be to find a space as a support teacher in another district. I've literally had to take my class mid-class with a cart and take all the students down to another place because we didn't have use of that classroom space anymore, and how disruptive that is to service delivery and to instruction and to the students having that feeling of equity as well, which all kind of snowballs. So anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no,
It just
it's
popped
a
into
great
my
point.
head as you're saying that. Like those are really important parts of education, and unless you're in it or your child's part of it, it's just not on your radar, and it wouldn't be. So it doesn't mean it's not important.
It's a great point. One of the most impactful testimonials, for lack of a better word, that I can remember here in North Andover is when the high school principal at the time held up a textbook that was being held together with duct tape, and how it brought to everyone's attention, we just aren't spending money on the materials like we need to be.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
And if I could jump in for a moment and just say, like, when we first started talking about a 21st century education, really what we meant was we needed to get some more technology into schools. But over the course of this year, as you guys have done this, it's really come to my understanding that when we're talking about a 21st century education, we're not talking about lecture-based education like we were back in the 50s when these schools were designed. We're talking about student-centered learning. We're talking about differentiated learning profiles of different students. And we're talking about collaborations so that teachers don't have 100 one-room schoolhouses in North Andover, but that, as we said a decade ago, a North Andover education is a North Andover education, and that you should be getting the same opportunities and curriculum at Thompson that you get at Sargent, that you get at Kittredge. So really broadening our understanding of what a 21st century education is. And it's not just about technology, it's about reaching children where they are as learners.
Absolutely.
Helen, that's a great point. And Jim, I'd just add, to everyone's point, just think about, and Kittredge is 71 years old. Think about what the needs of students were in 71 years ago, and I just think about the health report tonight. Think about the needs of what a school nurse and a wellness and a health department does for our kids today as compared to, that time ago. And, EL, special education, OT, PT, I could name a bunch of them, but schools weren't designed with those thoughts in mind. And make no mistake, North Andover has is creative over the years to exhaust the use of every space possible in buildings to do what's best for our kids. And there's not, Kittredge has been very creative over the years. So, but all of them to find the right spots. So.
Yeah, there's a book Jamie Vollmer wrote, describes a list of things that schools, let's say 70 years ago, schools had to do and what they have to do now, and that's why we're here.
Right.
The next section, enrollment projections, I've talked about already. We are not hanging our hat on enrollment projections being the reason for this. It's just one aspect of it, with the thinking being that if we are growing 30 to 35 per year, and that's what we're projected to do, then we should build in that extra capacity so that we're not doing this in 10 years again. If we're going to do it, we might as well build in a little extra capacity as well. So Michael did a great job bringing it all together, showing the trends. There's a trend line. You can see that beginning on the left, and if you carry it all the way over to the right where the orange is, that would be about 30 to 35 per year. We talk about past projections, and one in particular that when they were doing we're trying to have the Foster Farm elementary school built, the projections that they presented were just way out of whack, and partly because they focused on the previous few years before that and small kind of N in years. And so if you follow that trend at that time, it would have been a steep increase. But if you just extend it out and show the 30 to 35 per year, that's a much more consistent and reliable trend to follow. The other thing that we focus on with the enrollment projections is the impact that developments have. And we just try to stress that it's not, I can remember trying to do my own math on a new development. You look at it and say, okay, how many units and how many bedrooms? And okay, so you drive by Princeton properties up there and say, wow, that's probably like 100 kids, right? We've got, I think we're up to 7 now, kids from that development. And so,
7, not 17.
7.
7.
Single digit 7.
But how many buildings
Yep.
are open? It's 4 buildings.
I've got that question, and I'm curious myself to see what capacity they're at so far. Anybody know?
I think 3 of the buildings are open.
Okay.
That's what I
I
was
was
gonna
thinking
say.
2, but 3.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
I think it's at least 3 at this point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the first thought I had too, was what percentage capacity are they at so far? So, but anyways, it's been pretty consistent that the numbers that you see, and you see them here, 6, if it's a single bedroom, not surprisingly, that doesn't generate a lot of school-aged children, 6 out of 100 units. For 2 bedroom, it's 24 students out of 100 units, and if you've got a 4 bedroom, you're going to expect some children. You can expect almost 1 per 4 bedroom unit. So, and that's been pretty consistent. So that's what we try to emphasize on the enrollment projections. And then research topics. Chrissy and Christy are going to talk about what they talked about in that section.
Right. So Christina and I researched the different grade configurations, and there were 6 models that we presented in a survey to the community. And really what we looked at as we started to build that survey was the grade configuration. And so when we were weighing the pros and cons and doing the research, what we wanted to address was looking at the grade configuration, what the space needs were, and what was equitable, which Jim has mentioned. And also the human factor of what does the student achievement look like, enrollment, parent involvement, transportation, student interaction within the facilities. And we got a lot of great feedback as we presented the survey, but we were looking at like what is going to be the best social, emotionally, and growth for our students. And so the 5 different grade configurations that we looked at was options 1 and 4 were maintaining the same grade configuration. Option 2 would be a change where we would remove the 5th grade from the elementary school and create a 5th and 6th grade center. Option 3 provided just a 6th grade standalone option. And so as you can see throughout these, that 6th grade was really the pivotal grade in all of this to help with the elementary schools and at the middle school level. Option 5 was to create district-wide schools versus the neighborhood schools. And option 6 was to bring the 6th grade back to the elementary school buildings. And so Christina will share.
I'm just going to talk about the research that we did into this. There's been extensive research on grade
Could you
configuration.
please use a microphone?
You just
Thank
bring it
you.
close to it. Yeah.
It helps the viewing audience at home, I'm sorry.
Is that better?
Better, Helen?
Better?
Keep going.
Better?
Now it is.
There's been extensive research done on grade configuration. Numerous studies, none of them point definitively to any ideal configuration, depending on where the studies are done in the U.S., the socioeconomic needs of that area. So we looked at some of the main points that all of those studies looked at. The biggest thing is probably transitions, that if you create smaller grade spans, you are looking at more transitions for students as they make their way from K through 12th grade. And the more transitions you have, the more breakdown there is with parent communication, with student achievement, because they're getting used to a new school, they're getting used to new principal, new teachers, all of that points to a degradation in the student's achievement. So that was the one thing that was probably the main sticking point for us is it worth it to increase transitions just to get maybe different grades at different schools, affect our space capacity and things like that. A lot of the research focused on 6th grade. That seems to be a pivotal age. They consider it a pre-teenage year, I guess, and that's like 10 to 12 years old. Children are going through physical, psychological, social development needs that are really unique at that age. And so it's kind of a pivotal point as to, do they belong in a middle school environment? Are they better off in an elementary school where they are the highest grade? Or are they better suited to maybe a standalone or a lower middle school, which is why in our options, we kind of concentrated on the 6th grade level. And one other thing we looked at is the impact of neighborhood schools, which we currently have for the most part versus these smaller grade span schools. And there are advantages and disadvantages to both. Again, no study could say it's better to have a neighborhood school or it's better to have this grade span. So given all that research, given the feedback we received from the public survey, we determined that really the best thing that would work for us is maintaining the current grade configuration. There's really no need to change something that is working right now. And that's pretty much it.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and we had that conversation with MVG when they were in our meeting last week, and they agreed. They said that every community is different, and you know what might work in one community doesn't work in another. And we have an aged facilities and a space issue. We don't have a student achievement issue. If we had a student achievement issue, then you would think about doing something different, whether it be, you know, not neighborhood schools and doing district-wide, or doing something different with the 6th grade. They said that it's going to be a tough enough battle to have these projects funded, approved and funded. You don't want to wage a battle that you don't have to, and, you know, kind of wage a war on two fronts when you don't need to. Focus on this is working, and you want to address the two issues that you have of age, facilities, and space. So that was their recommendation as well.
And the survey results kind of stuck with that.
Right, and if we want the support, we know where people stand. They want their neighborhood schools. Yep. Then we identify the options. We've gone over the options. I don't know, Holly, if you wanted to add anything else on the options part?
No, I mean, they're pretty straightforward. You can read them.
Yep, and everyone I think is familiar with them by now. What we did add at the end of the option section are the estimates so that people can see the cost associated with each option. So we have the 6 options, plus we have 1A, which is instead of renovating Kittredge, it would be a new Kittredge. So you can see that the costliest option, not surprisingly, would be to add a second middle school and renovate the existing elementaries. The least costly is just add to and renovate the existing schools. But the second least cost option is the new Kittredge. The delta is surprisingly small between 1A and 1. It's about $10 million. Yeah, I say small. But when you're talking long-term, it's not as much as I would have thought.
Can I ask you just a random, if you were conceivably to do a new Kittredge, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do? Are you building while the students are in their existing? Then once the building is complete, you are doing a tear down of the prior?
That's what they think would happen, yeah. And it's something that, you know, as you design, you can figure out more clear what the plan would be, but they think initially that would be what would happen in that case. Yep.
Because there's nowhere to absorb them somewhere while
So
you're.
You
that's
might,
something
right.
we have some experience with.
Right.
I mean, historically, probably not all of us personally, except me a little bit with the high school.
And Thompson was
And
the
Thompson.
same way.
Mhm.
So I wasn't at Thompson, but, you know, at the high school, we, you know, built the new school, stayed in the old school, took 3 extra days on February break, built in, and we made that transition over February break in 2004. At North Andover High, and then they tore down the old building, all while doing it. And the Thompson, I wasn't there for that. I didn't have kids there at that time, but, you know, I know that they built the new building to the left of the old building at the same time. So the kids were in
And
school.
we were trying to
in those
get
two-
grass 7 years later.
Yes.
Right, and like I said, they've been doing this for decades, and you come up with a plan that will work so that obviously student learning is not impacted.
May I ask a question about option 6?
Sure.
It says includes, 4.1 million for Thompson. So is that assuming that Thompson would need more classrooms in order to accommodate another grade?
The extra grade, absolutely why that is. Yep.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
But the rest of the schools could,
Well, the rest of the schools, they would still be Franklin, Kittredge, and Atkinson being renovated and expanded. Sargent wouldn't have to.
Sergeant could keep those students an extra year.
They would be able to, yes. Yes,
without losing any music and all.
correct.
There's 4 extra classrooms there.
So there's 4 rooms that aren't being used.
They're using them for other things now, but they could be repurposed.
Okay.
Exactly, yep. And then community feedback, we review the results and we actually provide the results. You can see all the questions and the responses are included for the community and for the staff. So you can interpret the data as you like.
So
And this is another thing that, as we tweak things, make it more presentable and more readable. You got a question?
it looked like there was about 700, 800 responses in.
Yeah, 766 I think was
Okay.
the community and another 166 or so in staff. Separate.
Okay, separate to that.
Yep,
And the staff pretty much mirrored the community.
right, the results were very consistent.
That's interesting.
I'm curious, for people who took that survey, did we get any information in terms of where their children are?
Mhm. That was a question. So we
Okay.
can break it out by, we did that with the equity question.
Yeah, I saw
We were able to
Gotcha.
see,
Okay.
Sargent parents felt this way, and Thompson parents felt this way, and Atkinson were the ones that felt like it
And we
was the
also
least
asked for
equitable.
like new families as well that like maybe don't have a child yet.
We asked where they were, right, either your
Okay.
children will be going, your children are currently going, or your children went through but have
Okay.
finished. Yep.
All right, cool.
And then we had the public forums, and what I highlight in here are the kind of frequent questions that came up with regards to a new middle school. And we were asked often about building a whole new middle school on the athletic field site, and we addressed that. It just isn't practical. The current building has a long life left in it. You just add to that. It would be a waste to build a whole new school. And then people asked about doing the addition out there, and the grade difference just doesn't make that conducive. So we don't need to retake back the athletic fields. It wouldn't be any benefit for us. The kindergarten was another one, and so we extended our recommendation, which you'll see in a minute, to include something to do with the kindergarten, because the basic feeling was that it's nice to have the kindergarten in one place, but it doesn't have sufficient space, especially gym space. That's kind of biggest beef about it, and some of the ancillary areas, so we do address that. Building up our schools rather than building out, the architects say that's something that's a possibility. Every time somebody looks at something, it's usually showing it built out, and they say there's good reasons for that, because more often than not, all your mechanical equipment is on the roof, and that makes it difficult and expensive to build up, but it's possible, and so if that made sense, we would do it. At that time, we would determine it. We talk about the Foster Farms question. Foster Farms was raised for both new elementary school, replacing Kittredge, or the middle school. Middle school, our concerns were that if you had, right now we have equity issues among our elementary schools. We don't have equity issues in middle or high school because everyone goes to the same school.
Right.
But if you have two schools, you could see inequity between the two middle schools. So that's one issue. And then as far as building an elementary school out there, it's the same idea. The neighborhood schools, from the community feedback was clear. They prefer their neighborhood schools, and we don't want to mess with that.
And your overhead costs of having 2 middle schools as well, right? You're going to have 2 principals, 2 sets of assistant principals, 2 sets of nurses, all that
Definitely add a cost if you add another middle school, correct? Yep,
operationally.
yep. And then we get into the recommendations, and so, to cut to the chase, our recommendations are maintain the current grade configuration at all levels. ABC will be preschool and kindergarten, elementary stays 1 to 5, and then middle 6 to 8, and high school 9 to 12. Maintain current neighborhood elementary schools, but renovate and expand to address the aging infrastructure and code deficiencies, provide student support spaces and 21st century educational spaces, reduce class size to 20 students per class, and allow for projected enrollment in the coming years. Renovate and expand the middle school for all the same reasons, by adding 16 classrooms to the existing school. renovate and expand Atkinson Elementary. So remove the 2 aged portables, and everyone forgets about the portables. Portables are way past their life expectancy. So we have 2 at Atkinson, 3 at Franklin that need to go. So we need to remove those, add 10 classrooms to increase planned capacity to 450, and support spaces to meet the student needs. Franklin is similar, except that we need to add a gym. If you've been to Franklin, you know that that gym is not sufficient. Everybody else has a standard-sized gym except for Franklin. And then Kittredge, our recommendation is to build new instead of renovating. It's our oldest building, and anyone that walks in there says, "Oh man, we don't think it would really flow well and work well. It would be expensive renovation. The delta between renovating and building new, you could have, instead of renovating and adding so that you're at 360, you could build a new school at 450. And one of the benefits of that too is that the price could drop on the renovations of Atkinson and Franklin, because overall district-wide you might not need as many classrooms, could drop by a couple, so the price could drop down on those two. And then, as I said, we wanted to address Brad Street. So the suggestion there is to build a new gym on the site of the existing preschool playground, and then move that playground over to it next to the existing kindergarten playground, and build a new reception office space that would free up some additional space for them as well. And that's our recommendation.
All right, so I think we should give the committee an opportunity to ask some questions. Before we do that, any thoughts, questions, anything you want to share that you, I don't mean to put you on the spot. Somebody's looking at me with daggers. Don't ask.
One of the things that I had brought up when we, I believe, met with MVG was parents and teachers might be concerned that the 3 buildings that we're looking to renovate and add to, the current space that's there now, what's going to be touched there now in terms of bringing that space up to the same level that this new addition would be. And we were reassured that, yes, like, they would be looking at that entire space, redoing what needed to be redone. It's not just, prettying it up, but it's making the renovations needed so that the older space is equal to the new space.
That's helpful.
Right, and because of the work, what has to be done to update all of the systems, everything gets gutted. So you don't recognize it. It's a new interior that you have. Yep.
That's helpful.
That's a really good point. You oftentimes see communities with an old building with a renovation, and you can't tell that it's,
Everybody wants to muscle their way into the new part. Yeah.
Right.
No, I'm saying, but the whole building, they
Yeah.
typically, they do a great job in the mechanical piece and, sprinklers, all the whole works.
So we'll bounce around and see questions from the committee, so.
Skip me.
I can skip you, you sure? Okay. Mrs. Picard.
I have a few questions. My first question is, I see the recommendation to add space at the ABECC. I don't see the dollar figures that would go along with that. Is that included in the figures before, or is that a figure that we need to get?
No, we
before
got
we
it.
make decisions?
We got it. It's $2.8 million.
Okay. And because it's June and because we had some very, very hot days, is AC considered part of 21st century learning?
Yeah, it's a question that, it's funny because I've been working with Lorene for using some COVID money to increase our AC capacity, because we're going to have summer school for some of that. I keep forgetting the term. What's the term?
Accelerated
Unfinished
academy?
learning.
Unfinished learning, yes. So, yeah, and that certainly begged the question that when we do these renovations, I've already asked Steve Foster and Greg Roberts to let me know what questions we need to ask when these are being designed. Because is there a way to include that in the HVAC system? So we will be asking that question.
So my experience from having been a Thompson School parent, when that building was built, there was a decision by a school committee to not include AC because it was an equity issue, that Thompson would have central air and the others wouldn't. Later information came saying that there was no place on the site to put an air conditioning unit, but it is ducted for it. So I want us to make wise decisions and not repeat the mistakes of the past. One thing that you said that that I'm scratching my head a little bit about, and I don't think we can probably speak to it tonight, but what you said was we have an aged facilities and space capacity concern, not an achievement concern. And coming off of our COVID year and looking at the assessment numbers that we had, we certainly had some achievement concerns for some students in some schools. So I would like us to be mindful of that as we look at this and how we can impact achievement by impacting space.
Yeah, Helen, I'll just say that, I even consciously reminded myself, although it didn't do me any good because I forgot to say it when I said that, that we're always trying to improve academic achievement. But this is in context to overall, our grade distribution and layout, we do not believe is a factor in any achievement gaps that we might have.
I see, that makes sense. Thank you very much for that. That's all for now. Thank you.
Mrs. Mabley?
Yes, so a couple things. Thank you for these recommendations. I spent some time digging around at the 1996 study that was done, that was posted in all the information, because I moved here in 1999, right when, I can't even remember if Thompson was still standing, the old one. The new one was done, but I think the old one might have been torn down as I was first moving here. So I saw that, and the 1996 study was talking about the Brad Street Kindergarten. It was a scary place that should not be used for school anymore, maybe could be administrative offices. Thompson had to be changed. It was not appropriate for education. High school, open space concept, disastrous. Kittredge should be considered to be something different pretty soon. It had a little bit of life, but not much left. So the fact that you're recommending that Kittredge should be made into a new building, if you hadn't recommended that, I was going to ask for that because of that study alone from 1996. So I love that. I appreciate that. Thank you. Because we have since changed taken down the Brad Street, rebuilt Thompson, rebuilt the high school. Another anecdotal thing just to share is I was looking on the, where I grew up in Western Mass, the school committee, and what they're dealing with right now, and they're looking at reconfiguring some of their schools. And I grew up in the same model we have here, except we had 2 middle schools to 1 high school, 5 elementary, 2 middle. And they are looking hard at moving to 1 middle school. Oh, and so I thought that was pretty interesting. It's a similar type of community. And while the 2 middle schools there were pretty equitable in terms of distribution and socioeconomically, both of the middle schools are like 60 years old, and so it's a big deal. So I thought that was interesting that there are a lot of movement toward a 1 building. So that the fact that you want to keep that was interesting to me. Part of the Kittredge rebuild was mentioned that maybe build it around the gym that's quote unquote kind of new.
Really new.
Right. Well, so something that occurred to me as you were talking is, was that a modular design? Do we remember?
The
No.
gym?
Yeah.
Gym is like prefab.
Right.
It's not unusual for gyms to be
Right.
built, but it's not modular construction.
Okay, 'cause
it
I was
has
thi-
a slab.
Right.
Yep.
I didn't know if we could maybe move that to the ABCC. And because I would hate to have the design of a new Kittredge be tied around attaching to that. As much as I hate to waste money, I would hate that to be the
Yeah, it
constriction.
actually, in having the discussions with MVG about the concept, for one, that wouldn't fit
It's huge, I know.
in that footprint at the
Yeah.
Brad Street. But they thought it was going to work better to be on the other side of the gym, because now you have more lead up to the building. And
Yes, you're not hanging on the
Right.
street. Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Oh, absolutely. So that just occurred to me. And then tied into what Helen just said about the air conditioning, will we be under any green building requirements, you know, for environmental friendly, you know, LEEDs quality, for schools, are we under those kind of constrictions that you have to put that sort of
We're a
thing?
green community,
Yeah.
so I'm not sure what that means with regard to obligations.
Okay,
And there are MSBA standards are often stricter than the local, although
Mhm.
we've been adopting stretch code, so there's probably not as much of a difference as there used to be. I'm not sure, but I don't think it would have that much of an
okay.
impact.
So I love that, but I also know that can be extremely costly, so I was curious.
Mhm.
And then, what, if any, so I have to confess, the other option I was intrigued by was the Atkinson as a 5-6 and the middle school as a 7-8, because while transitions are a worry, you could conceivably, you're transitioning to a campus from fourth grade, and I thought that was, actually, there were some interesting things to consider there, and I didn't know if you guys were willing to share any of your discussion around that, and did that even get very far? I liked that idea a lot, so I was just curious.
Yeah, I'll say.
If anybody wants to speak to it.
Before I let these guys speak to it, I'll just say that that's probably the same reaction in the group, that one had the most interest of any of the other options. The community feedback certainly didn't support it as much as we thought it was going to, but I'll let these guys speak
Well,
to
and
that.
I would say it could also be because of how it's described, right? If there's this way you could tell that story, I think that would make it very attractive.
Mhm.
Not that you didn't make it attractive, but I mean, you could really tell that story, I think, in a compelling
We
way.
weren't trying to persuade on any.
I know, right. That's why I was saying, if we
Yeah.
were to go forward with
Right.
that, I could come up with some,
Yep.
as much as I like what you proposed, I could come up with some pretty good reasons why I like the other one too.
Mhm. You guys.
You guys want to go? I'll go if you don't want to go.
I have two thoughts for that. One is, assuming that the middle school field project does happen, you wouldn't get as much of a campus feel because
That's
you
true.
would have this large town park in the middle. Not to say that they can't cross over and things like that. I'm not really sure that you'd get as much of a campus feel as you would right now, where it's just a big open space.
Right.
So
a good point.
there's that to consider. The other consideration, and I'm an Atkinson parent, so obviously I have personal feelings, is that is the one neighborhood school that you would now have to redistrict.
Right.
And it's a hard sell to say we're going to maintain 4 other elementary schools and
Right.
not redistrict those children, but redistrict this one school.
Right.
So.
And I was here, my older daughter started at Thompson in first grade, and then there was a massive redistricting afterward, and while my family wasn't impacted, I definitely knew families that were, and that was not a fun time, so.
Mine was.
Yours was, Helen's was, that's right.
And to your point earlier, I think that's a challenge. People are fiercely loyal to the districts in which they go. So you could say, oh, the Kittredge is the oldest school, but if you've been at the Kittredge, you know, people would say, oh, I'll do 31 in a class there. We're not going to, move.
Right.
Or if you're at the Atkinson, I'll do 32. Let's bump out that portable, open the door a little bit, So people love the schools that they're in. But the reality is we're in 28 square miles, and all the schools are really
Tight.
close. And people think, oh boy, Sargent's so far away from here. I mean, it's probably 2 miles from here, 2.1 miles, 2.2 miles.
2.02.
2.02. So, and you're like, wow, that's way out. Sargent's way out. But all the other schools, I mean, we can pretty much walk to from here for the most part.
I only know that because my son just qualified for the bus.
So,
Yeah, so we had that same discussion in our last couple meetings when we were talking about what recommendations to put forward. Like, well, do we put the recommendation that the committee likes or that we found from the surveys? And because there were a lot of people on the committee that felt the same way, like, we really like this option, but that's not what the public is asking for. And it's probably because, like you said, nobody wants to change.
Right.
But then we also have to be mindful of the fact that this is affecting families for the next, 20, 30 years. So redistricting affects a small number of families now, but maybe we have to think about the long term too.
Well, and that's kind of why I did want to push on that a little bit, because as much as I do see some challenges with that, and I would like to, I know we can find a study to support any configuration. You guys went through a lot of that. But I can see a lot of benefits of 5 and 6, because essentially the 6th grade is isolated already at the middle school. So you put that with 5th, that's
I
a
actually
very,
did do research for that, and I couldn't find a lot on the 5-6.
you couldn't, yeah. I know my husband grew up in that configuration, but, you know, he liked it because that's all he knew, right? I grew up with 2 middle schools.
Right.
I liked it, that's what I knew. So we go to Atkinson, we like it, that's what we know. So I get it, but, yeah, I'm
And there's a-
happy with this, but I really liked that other one too.
There's ebbs and flows, right? You know, it's some of the neighborhoods, it's just that that's been the neighborhood for that school for a long time. You know, they're kind of arbitrary lines. You think like, I think Kittredge, and I look at the bus zone, and it goes around Lake Chickawick.
Well,
Right,
my
and-
kids went to Thompson, and my neighbor across the street went to Atkinson. That's
Right.
just where the line happened when my daughter was in 2nd grade. So those are my comments at this point.
Christy, were you about to say something?
Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to say, I mean, throughout this whole survey, that was probably, throughout this whole process, that was an option that was very intriguing because it helped with capacity in different areas and still bring,
expand it.
yes, and still keeping the community, the neighborhood schools. So I agree with you.
I was going to say, one of the things in doing the research that came up a lot and we didn't explore at all, and probably because of the number of buildings and capacity, is K through 8, which is becoming a very popular model. A lot of school systems, school districts are seeing a lot of success with that, or have had that in place and don't want to change it. They're seeing a lot of success for having that wide grade span, you know, older kids acting as mentors to younger children. So a lot of the research really did actually concentrate on that, but it was something we obviously didn't look at all because to have the space capacity to do K through 8, you know, that just isn't happening in any of the schools. So
We also entertained the thought of doing another survey, narrowing down the options. But we talked ourselves out of it because, one, we didn't want people to think, oh, you know, the results were really clear. So that was the first part from the initial survey. So it's like, why do another one? Are you trying, you didn't get the answer you wanted?
Right,
So now you're
right.
trying to get a different answer? And the other part being that now if you get people focused on 2 or 3 and they really dig into
To
that
one,
one,
right.
and it's not the one that's ultimately chosen, have you
Right.
lost their support?
Right.
So for
No,
those
that's
reasons,
legit. And that's why I'm saying, well, I really enjoyed that one. I like this as well. And that's human nature, right? So you're right.
Ms. Petrosky?
So it's interesting because last year, the school that I have been working at was actually a 5-6 school. It was kind of thrown together as an overflow school for the district as they were trying to create some equity in the district. And there are a lot of pros and cons to it. It was really small, which is nice. But the kids, and maybe this is because it was new and we didn't have that time together to develop that kind of environment and school spirit, but the kids really felt detached. But maybe if it was set up differently throughout the district, it might have been different. But that's just, it's interesting because as a teacher, I loved it. It was great. It was small. But we definitely, those 6th grade students were, again, 6th graders are a kind of their own unique little group, right? And we love them, but they have a hard time with a lot of things like transitioning and all of that. So, yeah, that's just my little input. And again, it was just 1 year. This year we transitioned to a 4-5 model. Again, it's the overflow school, so we're constantly changing. But so thank you for all of this work because as I was reading through this, it was so well organized and easy to read, and I really hope that the community takes the time to go through and read it, especially looking at the enrollment analysis. There's so much talk right now. I know at the town meeting it was really intense, talking about, you know, the new developments and the possibilities of the impacts on the schools and the enrollment and the capacity and all of that. So that information was really helpful, I think, and reassuring. And so I really hope a lot of people take the time to read through it because it's a lot of information, but it's so well organized that it's really easy to read and helpful. So that was great. I wonder, and I don't know where this goes in the process, but once we get to the point where we say, okay, this is the recommendation, will there be opportunities to tour other schools and other districts to see that are like newly built, so we can see like models or things that are already happening and who can be part of that, because I feel like that would be pretty powerful and helpful in making the decisions on what these schools need to look like, especially when we're looking, again, I'm sensitive to those pull-out services, what creative ways have been done so that those spaces do continue to be those spaces, so that if the enrollment projections are for some weird reason completely off, and then we're looking for space to, I know like, we mentioned another school that they're moving things around, but I know at Atkinson, they've moved the library to like the hallway before the art room. I mean, that's not a library, right? And then it was a classroom, and then it was a different classroom, and then there's so anyway, so we want to avoid that. And so, I don't know, maybe I should be more knowledgeable about what new buildings are around in the areas that we could go see, or are there models? I don't know what the process is. So those were my thoughts going through. I think that's it. I was really, the enrollment analysis was really helpful for me. I was really impressed and reassured, like moving forward as we are talking about all the developments that potentially are happening in town. So thank you.
So yeah, I can address both points. One, I was joking with Dr. Gilligan after town meeting that our subcommittee hadn't even produced the final report yet. And we were referenced more than my doctoral dissertation has been referenced in one night. So that was very interesting. But yeah, people, we're hopeful that they will read it. We hope that it makes sense to them. And it certainly sounded like people already were reading something that we were producing. They weren't always accurately quoting us, but that's okay.
Well, this is so clear cut. It's like black and white and right there. And it's good that that we have a community that is so involved, so that we do make sure that we are doing the best that we can. I hope that's not misinterpreted as, anything other than the concern is valid, right? And so this was a good reassurance. I think it's a really good reassurance.
Yeah, and if we learned anything from Bradstreet, it's to include staff, school committee, administration in the design.
Yeah.
And so, yes, to answer that question, you definitely will have the opportunity. We will talk to whoever the architect ends up being, what other projects are out there, what's the trends that it seems to be happening right now, and get to do some site visits and have a say in design.
Okay. Thank you.
A couple of thoughts and questions. One, again, just thank you so much for your time and tireless nights, and I was able to join a couple of the virtual meetings that were there, and some, I think, in the beginning did not have great participation, but I think that grew as people started to hear about it, talk about it, know, and all of that was fantastic. So thank you for stepping up. That it's a role we couldn't have done without you guys. And for the community to complete yet again another survey, I think was really great as well. I felt like even your evaluation was a survey, and but I think we're used to it, but we're trying to get that information out. The fact that we get 700, almost 800 responses is good. It would be great if we had more, but based on even the numbers who show up at town meeting, it's 400 or 500 people who are kind of there. So 700, I think, is good. As we get closer, we may be needing to solicit more information from people, and I think reserving the right for a survey would be helpful. So, a couple of quick questions. Anything new that we're building, I'm assuming would be true brick buildings, not modular.
The recommendations and those we've talked to in our own are definitely traditional build.
Okay, all right. One of the things that I think would be helpful, and it could be there and I missed it, but could you possibly add in anticipated capacity for each of the schools? So I think you have it, I think you have it in the notes there, but it would be great to be able to see current and projected.
And that's what, we'll make it clearer.
Okay, all right. Just like a simple chart would be very easy. I think one of the things that's really nice is I think NAMS is just a special place, and I don't know if you have kids that are there, or you're gonna get there. It's a scary place for some, at some levels, but it is really a special place. And I think, you know, we talked about multiple other towns where, you know, you have multiple middle schools. I went, in my town, we had 23 elementaries. We went to 3 middle and 1 high school. But when all of our elementary kids come in together and they are in 1 middle school, it's really pretty awesome. And if you're ever here at about, well, on a regular year, about 2 o'clock, 2:15 or so, and you just see the swarms of kids just walking down together to the youth center, going down to St. Mike's for CCD, or, you know, basketball or Stotchies or something like that. They're doing all of those things together, and I think it really helps to build some of the things from the community. And despite the fact that we have all of them together, I think it's amazing that even, you know, I've got a son who's a senior in high school, and you guys can all account for this as well. They're still meeting new kids that they've never had the experience to meet, even though they've all been in the same town together. And I can't imagine kind of if we had different middle schools, how much harder that would be. I do kind of, the 5, 6, it appealed to me a little bit, but I like that it's all together, because I just think that there's some really, just some interesting things that are there. There were some really creative models that were out there as well, and I think that is helpful, because I think the first time you presented, I think you said, we don't want to get to this point and say, what about this, right? You thought of like everything. There were things that initially went up, and I was like, oh my God, I hate that. That's awful. But I get what they did, right? Like, I see, you know, how you kind of went through and you thought through everything. And I haven't heard through any of the public forums that somebody kind of came up and said, you didn't think of having, you know, kindergarten and 6th grade together in the same building, right? I mean, like, it's just like you thought through all of these things.
There was only one thing that came up where someone had suggested that the kindergarten be repurposed as just a preschool so that we can meet capacity needs, because the wait list is quite large. That was really the only thing that came up.
Okay. Interesting. All right. And then the other thing that I would just throw out, and I know it's probably early from this perspective, but it would be great to see visually how some of these classrooms get added onto the buildings, right? So if I look there, you know, for example, Atkinson, remove the 2 portables and add 10 classrooms, like, what does that even look like? Is that 5 stacked on 5? Is that a row of 10? I mean, like.
Yeah, so we had it as part of the presentations when we did the public forums.
Yep.
But we can definitely add it to the report.
I think it would be helpful to kind of have, or as a hyperlink, you know, to have all of that kind of there. I'm sure you have it.
And I had it in there, and I took it out, but I can put it back in.
Okay.
It's the original MVG concept analysis that they did, and it shows each school and what it would look like.
Okay.
From a,
Or what it could look like.
from a, you know, sky view.
Because I think the stress needs to be, this is just
Yeah.
a concept, an early
Right, it doesn't mean
concept,
this is
but
what
it
we're
could
doing.
be completely different. Because I
That's
think the
right.
middle school is probably one of the spaces that's the most
Yeah,
controversial
exactly.
as
Right.
how to expand it.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with the fields behind it, right?
Mhm.
What's that look like with the AVECC,
Right.
Atkinson, all there, you know, I mean, that's a cluster, that's a hub.
Mhm.
What does that conceivably do, you know, to put classrooms closer to the roads, right? I mean, like.
Or
ju-
fill in
as
the
silly as it
courtyard.
sounds.
Yeah, I will.
Mhm.
It's interesting. I will say that their designs were well thought out for being the first
Like a
attempt.
first blush, yeah.
Yeah, and they were consistent with what, you know, we who've been here for quite a while would have thought, okay, what makes the most sense?
Yeah.
And it's what they came up with as well.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, we'll definitely add that. And just go back to your survey question. One of the dynamics that was interesting, and I may have mentioned this, was I was tracking the results as the responses were coming in. And moving from 100 to 200 to 300, the percentages didn't fluctuate much at all. So even if we got more, I don't think it would have impacted the
That's
result.
interesting, too.
But it's absolutely correct to say that we're going to need people to be willing to participate going forward, because we will be needing more
Right.
information from them. Yep.
Awesome. All right. So our next steps on this are what?
Yeah, so our next steps, Jim, if you want to walk us through.
Well, I would suggest, we're going to
Ready
continue
to
to.
check? Is that?
Yeah, $100 million. I would suggest that we'll continue to tweak the executive summary in the final report, and I think we come back in September, and the school committee is going to have to vote on what it's going to recommend to the Facilities Master Plan Committee,
Okay.
so that they have that in September.
Okay. Perfect.
So,
So we're gonna meet every night.
Yeah.
I think what's really cool is, this is, originally I was thinking in the beginning of the year, we'd be coming out of the school year and with this, but I think this is really interesting because there's a lot of emotions around change in schools, and for you guys to complete something this comprehensive is absolutely remarkable. Just an amazing job, and then the ability in the fall to kind of vet it, have a meeting, and then once it's in the facilities master plan too. Then we just have a whole host of options to be able to have tours, build public support, use the, whatever we use in terms of the consultants and different folks to visit other places. What are the designs? Because it's going to be critical to do that. And I can remember the work that went along with the old high school and some of these other places. But absolutely remarkable, because you know why? I think about this all the time. Now I'm going into year 4, back to the point from the beginning. 40 years from now, I don't want people to say, well, what was that superintendent and school committee and these folks thinking at the time when they built X, Y, or Z? And this is really thoughtful, and it's a really well thought out process. So really nice work. And it's difficult work because New England's a lot different setup in New England for schools than a lot of other places in the country. So really awesome.
Would it make sense to send that document to parents to email it out? I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know, maybe not. I mean, I know it's available, right? It's linked to the agenda, so technically.
It's linked to the
anybody can
agenda,
get
and
it.
it will be on the website as well.
How about Nightly News, adding a link in there?
Yeah.
I think you need something.
I think Nightly News is done for summer, so
Well, we
I
did send
think
it
we're
out,
gonna
but I
be
mean,
looking at it again in
the big question
September.
is, do we want to make some tweaks, and then we can certainly post this right front and center.
But I think not everybody goes and surfs the website like some of us do, so.
But do you want to
Right.
make the tweaks first that we want to adjust?
Right, I didn't necessarily mean right now, but that way, people are more likely to open their email versus going on the website to find it. And that way, it's like covering everything, I don't know.
Well, and I also think, to Mr. McDevitt's point about, 700, 800 people, that's really good. That's in a window of time where people were really not putting their attention on stuff like this. They were worried about, are we going back to school full time? How am I gonna juggle my kids? I'm working from home. Maybe as the summer progresses and things are adjusting and people are re-energizing, it'll be the right time for people to actually give it some attention.
Yeah.
And it's easier to open your email and just say, oh, I really wanted to read that, than to go find it.
The important, in talking to MVG, the important part is to get the momentum and keep it going.
Right.
And so what's the best timing for that?
Yeah.
And they talked about the road show. So I'll have conversations with them about what you're asking. But more than likely, they'll say, you want to send it out as kind of an introduction to them if they haven't already seen it, and the invitation to,
Okay.
A next step.
Yes.
not too far from now, we're going to be having these meetings that you can attend and ask questions, see
Yes.
the concepts. So
Yeah,
I think
that's
that's a
great,
good
yeah,
start.
that makes sense.
And that might
Yep.
fit well, right with the executive summary that's going to front it. Like, these would be, the time frame for folks to
Yeah.
see.
That's good.
Yeah, I would not want us to send it out right now, and then we're all going on break and trying to recover a little bit from this year.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it was interesting when you guys were doing this work. Being out and about at different schools, I would go by a pickup line, and someone would say, "Oh, I hear that the school committee, the schools that you guys are doing this," or well, you guys were exploring every option, even though we said it 1,000 times, like, that is not an option. I heard, we're building a school at Grogy's Field, and we're doing, so it was just interesting how, like, that kind of takes off. But really awesome job. And to the folks who aren't here tonight, too, who
Yes.
participated. It was looking at all this stuff, I was like, wow, these are really talented professionals, like a great report. We are lucky to have such talented families and parents.
Thank you
Chair
very much.
McDevitt, we will want to relook at the school building committee, because that was Mr. Teresi in the past,
Right.
and several members of that committee are no longer available in the same way, so we'll have to look at that
Yep.
committee probably in the fall.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay. Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you guys very much.
I know it's a long night, thanks.
Yeah.
Dr. Chan's like, I can't believe I got pushed to the back.
Long
I
night.
was thinking we were at the end of our agenda, we could go home now.
All right, thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
All right.
guys.
All right, so let's jump back up to old business. So old business A, the second reading, the annual appointment of the school physician. So let me just get my pages here. So the recommended action is that the committee appoint Dr. Chen to serve as the school physician consultant for the fiscal year 2022 at an annual cost of $6,300. So I would entertain a motion.
I will move that the committee appoint Dr. Chan.
So
as
Holly
presented in the packet.
Lynch, is there a second?
Second.
That was Pam Petrowski. All right, so we will now open it up for questions, conversations, anything, Dr. Chen, if you want to speak. I don't think you spoke at the,
Not in person.
not at the old, not at the new business, sorry.
So yeah, it's wonderful to see you guys in person, and it's been a little while, and it's nice to see new faces that are familiar. So nice to see you all. It's been a challenging year, and but I must say, in my experience as a community pediatrician, working with different school systems, other towns, private schools, North Andover is exemplary. So, and I don't mean to exaggerate in any way. So, feel like with this pandemic, it's all about making adjustments to, rapidly changing situations. And I think with a great, staff, nursing staff, working with Cheryl and her nurses, I must also say the same thing for the school committee as well. I feel like everyone's very open-minded and willing to try to kind of move on to, as we find out more things about this awful pandemic. We've adjusted pretty well. And I can say compared to other schools, I've done a very, very good job. So if you have any other questions,
Thank you. Any
I'm happy to
questions?
answer any.
No, we're happy to have you. Sorry, I'm tired.
Yeah, I would just comment that having served on the Health Advisory Committee, I've been so thankful for Dr. Chan's guidance, and it's a very mutual setting. He's asking questions of the nurses, and the nurses are asking questions of him, and I think it's beneficial in all directions, and particularly thankful for the regional work that we started together this year that Cheryl mentioned earlier, on Dr. Chan's part in helping facilitate that as well. So I just really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Mrs. Mabley,
I'm all set, thank you very much.
Ms. Petrowski?
I don't have any questions.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'll just say quickly, I think you've been here longer than I have, so.
20 years.
Is that possible?
I'm not going to go for your record. But when I, first even kind of learned and realized that we had a school physician and a consultant in this way, I really didn't understand what the need for that was. And over the past 9 years or so, really just seeing the value that you bring to the nurses and the staff with that. And I think, Cheryl has said, and when the nurses have come, when we have a question, we have somebody that we can call to make sure that things are good and right and reaffirm or, understand what's going on and what's happening. And I know that you work with, each other, and you're very collaborative. But I think this year, there was just an awful lot of communication that I think, happened with that, and just kind of understanding how things were. So, thank you very much for your time and your effort for that. So,
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
okay. I don't think there's any other questions, so we will move to a roll call vote. And Mrs. Picard, I will give you the honor of going first, since you're
Yes.
normally last.
Yes.
Okay, Mrs. Lynch?
Yes.
Mrs. Mavely?
Yes.
Ms. Petrowski?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so 5-0. Excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you again.
Thank you
All
for
right.
waiting.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
waiting as well.
Yeah.
Are you staying for anything, the others, or are you going on? Mass policy and then
Not unless there's.
wellness
any-
policy.
And I don't know if any other colleagues will have a question. I didn't, so.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Perfect.
Everyone have a good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll jump on to old business B. So second reading of the annual review of the wellness policy, which is ADF. And the policy states in part that the Health Advisory Committee will review this policy on a yearly basis and report to the superintendent and the school committee. After review of the district's wellness policy, the advisory committee is not recommending any revisions to policy ADF for fiscal year 2022. And there is no action required as a result, and the policy is attached in the packet. So do we have any questions? All right, I'm not seeing any questions on that, so I think we will jump to mask policy update with the DESE guidance, which is C. And is this the face covering? So policy EBCFA. And what recommendation are we making here, or changes based upon new guidance that's out?
So, I don't know if Ms. Barzak would like to comment at all or want me to take care of it, but basically, when we changed this most recently was when we allowed kids to go outside and not wear masks outdoors. Since I believe the commissioner, DESE, everybody has said that for summer school and such, it's up to us here to decide whether or not we're going to require masks for summer school or for any indoor. Obviously, we've already said we don't need it outdoors for any indoor activity. Based on the fact that we finished school at 0 cases, and it was great to hear tonight that the town has 0 cases. I talked with Attorney Egan, and she said she felt that this time it would be best if we were to entertain revoking the face coverings policy, so that because we're not planning to use that for summer school. I believe Ms. Barzak has other guidance she's going to share with the community about other protocols, but if you want to mention that.
So we already did write a protocol for the summer programs.
Okay, and that's
So-
been shared,
Right.
which.
So I think we will move forward, and as changes come, and as DESE makes recommendations, and as DPH does as well, we can make the changes using our protocols.
That's right. So basically, if we were to revoke this face covering policy, that means for summer school indoors in the buildings, which is what Cheryl has already put out and her team, that masks are not required. This would always be sitting here in the trash bin. And if we felt for some reason something changes in the fall, we needed to reintroduce some kind of mask covering, face coverings, we could revisit this. But at this time, the recommendation from you was that we don't need it any longer, and Suzanne said the best course of action was just to revoke it.
So my question is, if we revoke it and something happens, we would then just
Well, what is the
put a-
something? What is the something?
Let's say there's a massive crazy spike again. I mean, we didn't have a mask policy last year.
Right.
We put this in. I feel like revoking it, first of all, I'm thrilled that we're not going to have masks coming back. But I think the key sentence for me here is, as guidance from the CDC, the Department of elementary and secondary education, and the Massachusetts Department of Health evolves during the transition, the school district's policies will also change, and the school committee recognizes that the superintendent will continue to implement face covering protocols as required by the state and federal government. I feel like that covers it, and we don't need to revoke it. I'm happy to revoke it, but I feel like that language there gives Dr. Gilligan, in consultation with guidance from CDC, DESE, and DPH, the ability to say, something went real last week and we've got to go back and we're going to.
So what do we do with the second
So I
paragraph?
read that differently. I read it as we implemented this at the time when masks were required, and this is upholding that, saying we're implementing masks because of the guidance. It says we'll continue to implement face covering protocols. Doesn't say could change or could eliminate.
I think what the lot we've seen this year is, you know, and then this just came up because last week the commissioner had said, or as I had mentioned in the previous meeting, that, you know, he had came out with a statement in May and we had talked about it. But then more recently, he said in the fall that they're gonna, all health and safety guidance, including masking and physical distancing, will be lifted. We'll continue to collaborate with DPH to issue additional health and safety recommendations over the summer as they become necessary. And then the question became, you know, when they sent this out to superintendents, you might have seen the news, right? Folks said, oh, well, what about summer? And the DEC referred us a week or two ago, 2 weeks ago, back to a document from much earlier in the spring. I think it might have even been April, Cheryl, or March.
Yeah. It was
and
March 2020, I thought.
yeah, well, March about summer school, and then they had just come out and said, you know, what Cheryl had said is that, you know, the guidance for summer school looks different, and you know, so I think that to your point, if it's lifted, I think that we'll continue to do what we always do. We'll listen to DPH and the COVID task force in the town and make the best decisions for our kids.
But to me, we're saying that for summer school, you don't need to have a mask indoors, but our policy strictly says
Right, I
we
think
must. So I don't know how you can have both in activity or whatever at the same time. Because then I don't know, what am I following? Am I following that?
So if you're going to keep this, you have to change the language that we're going
Correct.
to follow. Right.
And that's why I asked Suzanne, how could we change the language? And she said, changing the language would be challenging because you'd be taking all of it out, so you might as well take the whole thing away.
Right.
That was what, I didn't ask her to come tonight, but that was what her recommendation was, because, but that, any decisions, like if there were spikes, as Mr. McDevitt's saying, or anything changes, then that, or Cheryl and the town medical staff and everything would advise, we need to go back to this for 2 weeks or what have you. But if we leave this in place, then we can't go forward with no masks I don't see how we can go, because then you're in violation of the
Right, I
policy.
agree.
And I feel like if we get, I'm okay with getting rid of it, but I feel like then if something happens and we have to put a policy in place,
Right,
it's time in order to get that to be done.
right.
I feel like that second paragraph, if that was removed, which basically states that face covering must be worn, that eliminating that then goes into, you know, students that could be excused, it's not required for medical, you know, outdoors.
But that's our point, you'd have to get rid of all of that. What are you being excused from if there's no requirement anymore?
All right, well,
How hard is it if there was a spike to put this back into place? Like, I mean,
To
like,
me,
Except a meeting.
if I could,
A meeting.
Mrs. Picard?
Oh.
Sorry.
what I understand from Cheryl is that we have protocols in place. We needed the policy so that teachers and students could have a clear understanding of what needed to be done, and so that everybody could be held to the same accountability. That's not the case during summer school. During summer school, we can use the protocols.
Okay.
Well, I should have printed it out, but what you sent out to the people attending summer school was pretty clear would make Mr. McDevitt feel a lot better, what you outlined. Actually, I can try to pull it up on my computer.
I think it's in the news, correct?
Well,
On the website?
I posted about the fall in the news, but there is, you know, there is the ability based on that local recommendation.
Yeah, I'm fine with removing it. I don't think you
Are
have
you sure?
to pull
Okay.
it up. I mean,
No, but I don't want you to think that we have nothing.
No, I just
Cheryl
want,
does
I
have
want to be,
something.
I want to be
Okay.
sure. One, I don't want masks. Let's be clear for anybody who's following along
So
at
if somebody
home.
wants to wear a mask, we are still
Of
allowed
course.
to wear a
Absolutely,
mask.
sure.
But the way that we wrote it, and Dr. Chan wrote it with us, and the Andover is using the exact same letter. So it's, if somebody calls you from Andover, it's the exact letter. So we're
Okay.
all following the same thing. Lead nurses we meet, we try to make sure that all the towns are doing the same.
Okay.
So it says encouraged but not required,
Right.
but still, maintain hand washing and physical distance if possible. And so it really does mirror what DESE and DPH are
And
saying.
your contact tracing, which you established earlier,
Right.
still comes into play.
Yes.
So if there ends up being something, then there's contact tracing and other issues.
All right,
It might
so
not be so hard.
is the plan to remove, sorry, I lost my page here, policy,
Revoke.
I lost it again, there we go.
E
EBCFA.
No, it's to remove it, and then if for some reason in the fall something's different, we'd have to revisit it, but at this point,
Can I ask a quick question? I don't know if this is the right time for this, but I know, just thinking of my own family, my youngest is extremely anxious now when we're in a crowded space. She will immediately put her mask on. And so, is there like something, or what are the thoughts on helping younger children with that transition? Because that, like, I think even when you
No,
said
I
like
think
the-
that's a great point, and we did
Yes.
put that in the bottom paragraph.
Okay.
That please be respectful, because some people will be wearing masks
That's
this summer.
Right, and I want her to, and I'm sure she's not unique, right? You even say like the student at the middle school who was afraid to shake the nurse's hand, right? These are the habits that we have instilled into our children, and we're glad that they followed these. And but there is that sense of stress now for them of, is this safe? And I don't know that I feel safe, and so how are we going to help? Because I also think, yes, it's safe, right, based on all of our numbers, and we're at 0, but how do we help these kids and maybe teachers to feel comfortable with taking our masks off? And
Well, I think
getting
summer
closer?
school will be a great pilot
right.
for us,
Right.
just like last year.
Yeah.
Summer school was a really great introduction for people to feel more comfortable.
Yep.
I plan to be around quite a bit this summer, and we have
Yeah.
3 extra nurses working as well for just those reasons.
Yep.
And we'll see how it goes, and if we find students aren't feeling comfortable, and he said something because I was wearing a mask, we'll make sure we take care of that
Yeah.
right away.
Okay. Yeah.
No,
I
that's
just
a
wanted
great
to kind of put
thing.
it out there because
No,
yes,
it's really
we all want them
important.
off, but I think
It's
that
hard
there's-
when they first take
Yes,
it
it
off,
is.
because
It
they really
is.
got used to it.
Right.
And
first
they
time in a
really
grocery
felt-
store without a mask is pretty
Yeah.
bizarre.
It's
So.
yeah, exactly. Even going into stores or restaurants, I'm like, wait, is this okay? I feel weird. So
It's so
imagine my
important.
child who's still developing all of her things, right? And just now, wait, you told me I have to wear this. You told me it's not safe without it. Now all of a sudden, I can do it.
Right,
I'm-
and I think it was great that we had outside at the end of the
First.
year, which was
Yes.
really good.
Yes.
And they're still a little bit separate from each other inside.
Yep. And I know
Um,
even my own students, I had several students, we'd go outside for mask breaks and they just kept their masks on, you know?
Even
and
when we
and I
did
was
the
like, "That's fine."
vaccines, some people kept them on outside, and
Right.
we said you can take them off, and they were
Yeah.
more comfortable.
Yeah.
That's
It was a
fine.
shock to the superintendent with the graduation rules. It
Yeah.
was the first time in public I had taken the mask off, and then,
Right.
in school buildings, we wore them for the remainder of the year, but outside, we weren't. And I felt really weird. I was
Yeah.
everywhere I went, I was thinking about that. So I think that's important, and I think the most important thing is that we just continue to follow the best practices and protocols that we have put in place for summer programming. And DESE's saying they've lifted all these restrictions for the fall. If they come out later in August with something that changes, they will tell us. And I think earlier someone mentioned something like about Andover, DESE changed guidance about kids outdoors not having to wear masks. And, we made the decision to follow some protocols and practices until we could get it to the committee for an official change. But they're pretty good about getting us that information, and I have the utmost faith in Cheryl and Caroline and Brian and the town, because they work so closely with DPH.
And to clarify, the guidance is to encourage, not to require.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yes,
So we're still encouraging people to wear masks if they're not vaccinated.
Right.
All right, so I would look for a motion to remove policy EBCFA.
So moved.
Second.
So I have motion by Mrs. Mabley and seconded by Ms. Petrowski. Any additional discussion or conversation? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to roll call vote. Mrs. Picard?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynch?
Yes.
Mrs. Mably?
Yes.
Ms. Petrowski?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So, we are maskless. For right now.
Encouraged but not required.
Right. All right, Dr. Mealy, the second reading of the student activity, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think you need to stay for anything else, so, thank you. I mean, unless you want to, I mean, you can be a long hauler, right? That was one of your words.
That's a word.
All right, Dr. Mably, the second reading of the school activity accounts, please.
Yes, so as I stated in the first reading, this is something we have to do annually, approve the student activity accounts. The ones that are on here are all active, including the ones that don't show any activity. I've been assured that they are still active and will be used. And then the two older class accounts are already in the process, as I said, if they're not already closed out, of being closed out.
And what is the length of time that we have to keep it in account here? Is it 3 years, 5 years for classes?
Oh, well, the policy, I'm trying to remember, it's within the first 6 months. They're supposed to make the choice. Usually the treasurer of that class has to decide, but we give them about a year to do it. Yep.
All right.
Yeah, it used to be much different. And
Yeah, we had some
Powers
that
and
had been
Sullivan
on
did
there
a
for
great
five,
job.
5 and 6
Right.
years.
I was president of my senior class, and I think we had it for like 19 years. They're kind of like, we need to get rid of this money.
Forgot you had it. All right. Any questions at this point for Dr. Mealy? I'm not seeing any, so we will move to a motion. Is there a motion to remove fiscal year, I'm sorry, motion to approve fiscal year 2022 student activity accounts as presented in the packet?
So moved.
Second.
That was moved by Helen Picard and seconded by Pam Petrowski. Any additional conversation? All right, we'll move to a roll call vote. Ms. Picard?
Yes.
Ms. Lynch?
Yes.
Mrs. Mably?
Yes.
Ms. Petrowski?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so 5-0 again. We're on a roll. All right, so I'm going to pause for a second here. Mrs. Picard, you mentioned in the chair's report, if I'm remembering correctly, salary increases, or
She
the
did not.
contract.
No,
but you did
we
not-
we
she
talked
did-
about the cafeteria workers
just the
and
cafeteria, okay.
and
Okay.
also the professional assistants,
Okay, perfect. I didn't,
but not the non-union.
for some reason, we had this conversation in executive, and then I wasn't sure if it was all in there or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, I have the motion language for this one.
Okay, so, is there a motion you might like to make on this?
There is. I would move to approve the amount to be paid in salary increases for non-union administrators for the FY '22 budget totaling approximately 1.5% in aggregate, but not to exceed 5% for any one person. The total aggregate increase will not exceed the amount approved as of the fiscal year '22 budget.
Okay. Is that a motion?
Second.
That is a motion.
Okay, so you're making that motion?
Yes?
Can I ask a question, Mr. Chairman?
Let me just see if we got a second.
Second.
Okay.
Do we have to suspend the rules since this is the first time we're seeing this?
No,
Okay.
because it's contract, it's not
Thank you.
policy. Yep. So motion was made by Mrs. Picard, seconded by Mrs. Lynch. Any additional conversation or comments? Mrs. Picard, do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No.
No? Okay. Anything else? All right, we will move on to a roll call vote. Mrs. Picard?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynch?
Yes.
Mrs. Mably?
Yes.
Ms. Petrowski?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so we are 5-0 again. We're now going to move to new business. I didn't tell you this, Mrs. Mably, but I'm going to see if you might want to, you were in charge of this.
Yes, I'm happy to
So
talk
I'm
about
wondering if you might like to share with us the 2021 recommendation for Educator Hall of Fame inductee.
I would love to. Our selection committee had some wonderful candidates put forth, and in your packet are statements in support of the unanimous choice by the committee to recommend Mary Julie Gregoire as the the 2021 Educator Hall of Fame inductee. The documents that are written here are just incredible. And I just want to note in particular the nominator. Hers is the last document that you would see here. Arlene Distel. If you read that, like I read it aloud to our group, and we all got a little misty. It's incredibly beautiful, the impact that this woman had, not only on her students but on the course of English education at the high school and in the district. And one of our very own now leading teachers in the district at the middle school, Carrie Caffrey-Zwingy, was not only a student of hers, she was also a colleague. And this, if you read about what this woman did for, I think, at a very difficult time when we had a new high school, we didn't have the staff in place, we had a lot of changes. She really helped to drive a good way to run things and adjust for the fact that we maybe didn't have all the staff we wanted. And she was department chair as well as the first humanities curriculum coordinator. And so she just was an almost overwhelming choice. I had the good pleasure of calling Mary Julie to tell her, and she's thrilled and is very excited and very honored. So that's the fun part. I got to do that. If I might share also a couple of things that our little selection group talked about is, and Greg Landry is going to pursue this further. We do want to have the in-person event this fall, along with the professional teacher status teachers. But we would like to keep something that we had from the COVID year. If you remember, all the teachers who got professional teacher status, we couldn't do anything in person, we couldn't give them anything, but they all made a little video about what they liked about teaching in North Andover and how they're happy to continue. So we want to keep that, because during the ceremony they come up, they take a thing, they say thank you, and the principal talks about them a little bit, but hearing from them really was impactful, we thought. So we want to keep that as not necessarily at the ceremony, but as a lead up to the ceremony, publishing that so everybody in the district can see these new teachers.
That's great.
So we want to do that. And we also are pursuing, and we'll come back to this group, to our committee here, adjusting maybe the application form. It's a little cumbersome and clunky. We moved it from, you used to have to just mail in a bunch of documents. Now you fill out a form. The form doesn't expand and collapse very well. It's a little challenging to use. So we're going to look at that a little bit and maybe adjust how nominations are made. So we'll bring that to you afterward. But the other thing that we did change a few years ago, the nominees who are not selected this year, we have maintained, and they are viable for next year, and already pursuing, getting even further support for those as well. So there are a lot of great potential candidates in the future.
Thank you, Amy.
Can you do us a favor and just remind us who is on the committee?
Yes.
Or is it's not secret, right?
No, it's not at all.
Okay, just making
So
sure.
there were, I got to choose another school committee member, so I chose Pam as her first entree into something fun to do. And then also an administrator, we used Greg Landry. And then for community member was Kate Rossi, who grew up in town here, as well, attended schools, and her children are in our school system now. And then I contacted NADA, and they chose Jane Broderick.
Oh, excellent.
So the five of us met about it. And between Kate and Jane and Greg, they knew a lot about things, and it was very helpful. So, but all of us, I'm not kidding when I say we got choked up when we read the statements. So very special teacher, sounds like, and I enjoyed talking with her too.
Nice.
Awesome. So just point of clarification, this actually says first reading, but
Right.
is that, do we need to vote on it?
We do. There's no huge rush because we're not doing anything until the fall. And we could vote on it at our retreat, we can vote on it later. So we can suspend the rules if you want, but we also don't need to. I mean, if somebody in the community came up and told us some horrible thing that we didn't know about, maybe that would be important.
Right.
But I certainly can't imagine. But, yeah, so.
Okay.
We did have a conversation at one point about having the Educator Hall of Fame inductee for the year speak at the opening of school convocation, or whatever we call that, the opening of school meeting. So if we wanted to have that opportunity, we would need to vote now rather than waiting until the fall. But
Well, there's one other option I might put forth, which is we did have a Hall of Fame inductee last year who, while he made a wonderful statement, he didn't get to meet anybody in person. We already plan to invite him this year so he can at least meet all the new teachers getting professional teacher status, but maybe he would be the one to tap for that this year.
that would be great, I think.
This one, exactly.
So it makes more sense to do the one that's actually inducted.
And then rolling forward, right.
Okay.
And Ray Grady, I think, would have a great interest in that.
Yes, I think he would as well.
And I think he would be very motivational for all of our teachers.
I like that idea.
All right. So
So we
don't
can
think we
vote
need
next
to
time.
do anything today.
Nope.
And good work by the committee in
It was
in
very
coming
fun.
up and selecting Mary. So awesome. So before we adjourn, I would ask if there are any comments from the committee. So I'll look to you, Mrs. Picard.
I just want to thank the committee and the community for all the support this year. It's certainly been a challenge. I tried to be a servant to the committee, servant to the community, and I just appreciate all the support I had. Thank you.
All right, Mrs. Lynch.
I just want to thank Helen for her service this past year. I know it was difficult, and you did it with grace and professionalism, Helen.
Ms.
Thank you,
Nagel?
Holly.
I also agree. I definitely enjoyed collaborating with you, Helen. This was a very challenging year to be the chair, and the word grace is the same one I had written down as well, because it was very hard. It's been a hard year, and you really you did a wonderful job, and I'm grateful to you for that. My only other thing I wanted to share is, I don't know if it's People Magazine or Time Magazine, whatever, that does like something going out and something coming in. For me, the word I'd like to go out and I don't want to hear and I'm very tired of is pivot. Nice. But my new favorite phrase is care coordination that we learned tonight. So I'm out with pivot.
Service.
Selfless service as well. I prefer those words. So thank you.
Ms. Petrowski.
So I'll just echo what everybody else has already said. So thank you for all your work, and actually thank you to everybody here, because you've all been really welcoming, and I still don't know really what I'm doing, but you're always so like easy to talk to, and I know if I could ask any question for any of you and you'd answer and help me, and you've already helped me a ton. So thank you, and I'm excited to be part of this team.
Excellent.
I'll just take a quick moment, Helen, and just say thank you for your really tireless service this year. And I know that it was a very difficult year for you on a lot of levels. But I'm going to go back to probably 9 years ago when I first met you. And I think we met like at a parking lot at CVS, and Stan said like, Helen will help, she'll be your treasurer. And you were like, oh, I'm so glad you're running, because we need people to run. I never would do that. And then I think whatever it was 4 years ago, somehow you said, I want to do that, which is always really great. And I think every time there's a change in leadership, I always think of kind of who's there, and I sometimes reflect back on what that person has done and the impact that they've had. And I can't think of anybody, no offense to anybody, but who would have been a better chair than you in this past year. The amount of patience that I think you had in so many places. And I had, I'd really kind of say the honor of working with you through negotiations, which was a tremendous amount of time. Just to negotiate the contract, which is always just a long process. And as soon as we completed that, we started negotiations on how do we get students and faculty and staff back into school. And you were very meticulous and very planning how we were going to do that and how we would be successful. And I think of the numbers that Cheryl shared in terms of where we were for case counts and all of those things. And as we negotiated, I don't think I'm breaking any secrets here, but one of the things that you just kept saying is, what does it mean to be safe? And we worked so hard on what that meant for the administration, for the teachers, and for the students. And yes, we had outbreaks, but that line to me just really resonates so much with what will it take for us to be safe. And I think you worked so hard for us to be safe. So I really want to thank you for that, your patience. A lot of patience with me, I'll add. But definitely appreciate all of your hard work. And thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right.
Mr. McDevitt, I'm
yes.
not going to add anything else. I just want to say, I don't think I could have said it better myself than what you said, Helen, and it's been a pleasure working with you. And congratulations, Mr. McDevitt, you're back in the saddle. You're not
Still in the
moving.
saddle.
Congratulations, the new person always gets something. So congrats. And Holly's put her time in. So, but Helen couldn't have said it better. And just thoughtful and awesome job.
Thank you.
All right.
To adjourn.
So I have a motion to adjourn by Mrs. Lynch. Is there a second?
I don't know if Ms. Picard would like to second that.
Second.
All right. Any comments? All right. We'll move right to roll call. Mrs. Picard?
Yes.
Mrs. Lynch?
Yes.
Mrs. Mabley?
Yes.
Ms. Petrowski?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So 5-0, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Good night. Thanks, Helen.